Well, a good evening to Hawkeye fans everywhere. I'm Corey Brada here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. I'm joined by a trooper, a savant, a college football man in Coach Don Patterson. And Don, I wish we were talking to each other under better circumstances, as the Hawkeyes are defeated at home 24-17. We've got people who want to talk to you and ask plenty of questions, but first of all, can you give us just your overall takeaways from one of the biggest losses we've experienced in recent years with the West title on the line, the 7-point defeat to the Huskers?
Very, very disappointing, Corey. It's not what I expected. I'll say that. You know, our history has been, as you know, that we play well in November, and today we didn't get that done. We simply dug ourselves a hole that we couldn't dig our way out of. We certainly made an effort to get that done in the second half. We made it interesting, but we started off so poorly that we could never quite recover. And I don't understand why it had to happen.
What do you mean by that, Don? Can you expound on that?
Sure. The mystery to me, Corey, was that, let me back up and just talk a little bit about the analytics. One of the things I did, I zeroed in on the 6 teams that had 6 conference opponents that had all beaten Nebraska. And I simply asked the question, are there any parameters that all 6 of these teams won? Now, this surprised the heck out of me. There were no less than 7 parameters that all 6 teams won. If you can imagine, all 6 teams that beat Nebraska won all 7 of these parameters. I'll tell you what they are now. Fourth quarter scoring, total offense, first downs, average starting field position, rushing attempts, time of possession, offensive plays. A lot of those parameters have one general theme that connects them, and that would simply be possessing the ball, grinding out first downs, and keeping Nebraska's offense on the bench. I fully thought that we would be able to get that done. And I will admit I was surprised. As you know, Corey, we started the game throwing the ball more than we were running it, with little or no success. I went back and looked. We passed incomplete on 3 of our first 4 snaps in the game. the fifth and sixth plays of the game for us, we ran for 11, and the very next play we ran for 10. And then I was thinking, of course, we're going to establish our running game and take control of this early stage of this game. Our next two plays after an 11 and 10-yard run, our next two plays were next 2 of 3 snaps were incomplete passes again. So at that point, I think we were over 6. And then I think Spencer, I'll take that back, 0 for 5, I do believe, and maybe he hit on his 6th pass attempt, I think. But anyway, we got off to a horrible start, and I was just mystified as to why we didn't try to establish the run. We didn't do it. And hindsight's always 20/20, I guess, but I'm just mystified as to why it started that way. Here's another thing that comes to mind. You'll find this very interesting. We talked about it off the air, Corey. I know you remember the conversation, and that would simply be average starting field position. The thing that was really, really amazing to me and interesting is that over the last 4 weeks, as the weather's gotten colder and colder, it's been more and more important to win average starting field position. Matter of fact, over the last 4 weeks, if you won average starting field position, your record over the past 4 weeks, regardless of who you were, your record was 12-1. And I haven't computed average starting field position. I do know what the play-by-play says, and I don't doubt that it's pretty accurate. As you know, I compute it a little bit differently than the NCAA does. But the bottom line, according to the official play-by-play, we started on the minus 29 on average. They started on the minus 37. That may not sound like a lot, but the field position in general was 8 yards better than ours. That happens to be exactly what our advantage was a week ago against Minnesota. A week ago, we had the edge on field position. Today, it went to Nebraska.
Don, again, lots of people that want to talk to you this evening, but I want to ask you this question first. This is, for anybody who's aware, this is not scripted. Don and I had a conversation 5 minutes before we went on the air, but I just want to ask you, why are you so the whole idea? Because that is odd to me that given Kirk's reputation for wanting to run first, why would you change that? Why would you switch that up in a game in which the metrics, the analytics scream to run first? That's my first question. I know that's the same question you have, Don, but maybe I'm just talking to comfort myself. But are you confident that Kirk Ferentz was aware of those analytics?
Yes. I don't know. I don't know what Brian knew, but I'm confident that Kirk was aware of those analytics. Yes.
Okay. Let's get to our first caller. Kyle, welcome to the show.
How's it going, Corey and Don?
Oh, it is what it is for you, Kyle.
Well, I have to say, none of our Hawkeye sports gave us much of a breather today. We were kind of anxious from start to finish. I don't know. Do you know how the women finished today, Corey?
They won.
Okay, good, because I saw it was a little touch and go for them for a minute.
Yep.
Man. Where do I start? Well, the first thing I noticed, Don, was I was on top of the same thing you were looking at there with the running. I heard halfway through the game, or 2/3 of the way through the game, one of the Big Ten reporters interviewed Coach Ferentz and asked him, like, is it time to start throwing the ball more, basically? I can't remember what the exact wording was. But he basically was asking it, is it time to open it up? Yeah, right. And Coach Ferentz evidently said to him, no, it's not. We're going to stick to our game plan and run the ball. And I sat there and I thought, wait a second. I went back and looked just a minute ago, but 3 of our first 9 plays were run plays, or traditional run plays. I think there was maybe 1 run to Arlen Bruce, and then it was something like 5 of our first 13 or 14 plays were run plays. So, I mean, he's saying we're going to stick to the game plan, but that wasn't. I mean, that evidently wasn't the game plan from the start of the game. But I don't know if they had stuff that was prepared in the past game. But where I don't know. I'm confused as to why he would insist on that's the game plan and we're going to stick with it and not start the game out that way. Is there any reason why he would start off throwing the ball if the game plan is to run the ball?
Well, the only reason I could think of is if you were convinced that Nebraska was going to anticipate run, that would be the ideal time, of course, to go play action pass. But the early passes were not so much play action either.
No.
We did have a naked in there. That's a play action, but in general, they were drop back passes. It's not as if we tried to fool them with a play action and try to get some kind of chunk play early in the game. I don't know what our longest pass was. It wasn't very long, of course. In general, it was short and intermediate passes. That was it. Was there a pass we threw down the field? I can't remember one.
No, not one longer than 12 yards,
Yeah.
I think, or 10 yards.
Yeah, maybe on a flush situation, maybe late in the game, that ball over on their bench, I guess, maybe was thrown 20 yards or more down the field. The one that was ruled incomplete. So it's just a little baffling, really, as to why we started that way. I could understand if we wanted to cross them up and throw early in the game, that would have surprised them a little bit, I think, based on the fact that they've had difficulty outrushing their opponents in their 8 games. Are you still there?
Yep.
For some odd reason, I lost the screen. But anyway, in the 8 games that they played, they got outrushed 6 of the 8 games. Rutgers actually outrushed them and yet lost the game by 1. Nebraska did outrush Minnesota, and I think it was just by a few yards. I can't recall the numbers, but so many of those losses, 5 of those 6 losses occurred in part because they got outrushed, and you would have thought that would have been a priority for us, is to also outrush them like a lot of these other teams did.
Yeah, and the other thing I heard, Coach Don and Corey, I'd be interested to hear both of your thoughts on this. Kirk Ferentz said after the game, he said, "I didn't think the offensive line played too bad." I don't know. I saw a very different game, but I don't know if that was the impression you got. What did you guys think about the offensive line today? Because I did not think it was. I thought it was horrible.
Well, I think good compared to what? That'd be my response. I think relative to what, Kirk? That would be my response, because relative to a successful Big Ten West contending team in a normal year, like a Wisconsin, or even during Northwestern's good years, I'd say no. I mean, I didn't think pass protection. We got so many problems still pass protection wise, Don. The pass protection issues they've gotten better incrementally. But overall, we have big issues in pass pro. Am I correct, Don?
Well, part of our problem today, we have what we call secondary stunts. Those are simply defensive backs that are rushing when you didn't expect them to. And I think in general, at least twice we got fooled. We had blitzers coming in that were unaccounted for. And I think in general, they came out of what I would refer to as a nub formation. Maybe the widest player on that side of the formation was a tight end. There was no split receiver, which of course gives that corner a chance to be close to the football when the ball snapped. And obviously, if he comes, we don't have very long to react to him. And a couple of times it appeared we had no provision for how to handle him. You've heard me talk about blitz pickup before. That was one of the beauties of standing up our tight end. The tight end would be sitting there looking at the DB. If the DB came, he'd block him. If he didn't come, he'd release into his route. So it was a built-in insurance policy for our pass protection. But at least a couple of times today, I haven't gone back and seen the replay, but I just saw it in real time. There were free rushers in our backfield, and typically they were corners off the short side of a formation. A couple of times at least that happened.
Anything else, Kyle?
Well, the only other thing that I wanted to bring up was the narratives that I think we've been fed a little bit in the press by Coach Kirk Ferentz. because we've covered the interviews throughout the year. At least you have, Corey, about things that he said about the offense last year. I think, like we heard, we won 10 games. We heard we won the division. We've heard over and over again, we control our rivalry games. Kind of what more do you want type of idea. So this year, not going to win 10 games, not going to win the division. Lost 2 of our long-held rivalry trophies. I don't know about you personally, but those are the 2, Iowa State and Nebraska, that I would most like to keep. Those are the 2 that I think are the worst to lose. And obviously the offense is ranked 130th out of 131 offenses in the FBS. So I don't know how he's going to do it over the offseason to keep Brian. I heard rumors on Twitter that he was going to potentially look to the NFL, Brian was. Can this keep going, or is this going to be a turning point?
Well, let me just say something. I don't really care if it upsets people or not. All right. And this is just me saying this. You can be upset, and all of us wanting Iowa. We, regardless of how you feel about Brian, and if people are frustrated with Kirk Ferentz, that's fine. When you're a real fan, it's hard to actively root against your team. And although I've heard people that have said,
yeah,
I wish Nebraska would win. If you're a real fan, I think it's hard in your heart of hearts, want the other team to win. But Let me just say this, Kyle. I think in the long run, the one positive that comes from this loss is perhaps it's enough to ignite change. And I would not be surprised if this is the loss that was the difference between pushing forward with par, right? With the standard here at Iowa, with Brian as the OC, because you'd be 8-4, you get to another West championship. How are you going to fire your OC after 2 straight Big Ten West championships? Kyle, that would be the narrative.
That's what I was afraid of.
To blow that championship in a home game against a 3-8 Nebraska team, okay? I'm not saying that if there's a silver lining here, I know fans may not want to hear that, but if there's a silver lining, if you're wanting change long term, this may actually assist those changes in happening sooner rather than later. But you're asking, will it make a difference? I don't know the answer to that, because heck, last time I knew, Kirk Ferentz had a clause in his contract which gave him a bonus for winning 7 games. So he just got a bonus because he won 7 games. That last I knew, at least in the language of the contract, that was a stipulation. So it's a good question. There is obviously we'll see what happens in the bowl game. Most people don't care. A lot of people aren't going to say, I don't care about a team that goes 7-5 going to Nashville. But I guarantee you it will be used as leverage if Iowa wins. So
yeah, it will be.
You're either 7-6, 8-5. Kirk's going to view that there's a big difference between those 2 numbers, and from a perception standpoint, there is a difference in those records. So that would be my answer, Kyle.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm kind of at this point now that we're through the regular season. I'm at the point where we all kind of do some reflecting after the season. Like I don't care what Kirk Ferentz says or anyone says. I know the defense is terrific. I know the special teams is terrific. I think this is one of the worst Iowa teams in the last 4 or 5 years. I think last year and 2020 teams would beat this team. Like I don't care if they would have won 8-4 or went 8-4 and gone to the conference championship game. Like I still wouldn't have viewed this team a whole lot differently, because
the only reason I don't like that comment, Kyle, is because I still believe this is one of the best defenses that Phil Parker's ever had, and I hate
the best.
Yeah, I hate grouping, and regardless of what happened with the injuries in the back end, and yes, TJ Hall gave up a couple plays. TJ Hall is going to be a fine football player at Iowa, Don. You know that. And Jamison Hines got fortunate a couple of times, but I think regardless of all that, this is one of the best defenses. So I hate to lump this team together and say this is, offensively, it's the worst team Kirk has ever had.
Yeah,
it's the worst team he's ever had. Literally, it's the worst team he's ever had. You can't really argue that. It's not even close, and it was bad last year. So that in and of itself, we've said this for how many weeks now? That in and of itself should ignite change. It's the worst offense he's ever had, and the last 2 seasons, Kyle, have been the worst offenses Kirk has ever had.
Yeah.
So if you don't make change after that, then you're never going to make change, and you've got way too much power. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, even last year, like looking back and watching tape on like the Penn State game, the Iowa State game, like I even felt watching those games like we were loaded with weapons last year compared to this year, and last year was horrible. I mean, at least we had Charlie Jones, Laporta. We had a couple players, Tyler Goodson. We had a few pieces there at least. I know Caleb Johnson's a future star, but um, I even compared to last year when we were 124th last year or something in
Something like that.
total
Yep.
offense. Like even then this year, I felt like we had nobody that could take the top off the defense, make a big play, just nothing. So it's
Kyle,
depressing, but hopefully you're right.
I've got a plethora of callers, but I appreciate your chatting as always, sir.
Yep. Thank you to both of you, Corey and Don. I know it's been a tough season, but really appreciate all that both of you guys do. Love your insight, Coach Don.
Thank you, sir. All right, let's go ahead and plug along here. Let's see. Ryan is on hold. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Hi, gentlemen. Thanks for taking my call. Yeah, Corey, I agree. I thought the same thing, and I think the most asinine argument is, hey, we have a winning record. Hey, we were 10-4 last year, or we could have gone 8-5 this year, as a reason for Brian to keep his job, when we know where his offensive numbers always are, but most importantly, the fact that Phil Parker routinely puts the team on his back and we get wins in spite of the offense routinely, really should have no bearing that Brian still needs to go. What was really disappointing. Go ahead, Corey.
I agree. I said that a long time ago. I've not changed that tune at any point. It's time for Brian to move on. Go ahead, Ryan.
The play calling was beyond baffling. Nebraska, number one, does not have a good secondary at all. They haven't all year. And the fact that we refuse still to throw downfield, I wasn't surprised at all that Nebraska hit us with that 87-yarder. I was surprised they hit us with such a long one, but the fact that they stung us early didn't surprise me, because they were willing to throw the ball, and they have been willing to do that all season. What surprised me, though, is, despite the sloppy play, the turnovers, the penalties, what surprised me, though, was like with 8.5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, down 3 scores. This is right before Caleb broke one. We were just killing clock, running the ball. No sense of urgency of throwing downfield. And when you're down 3 scores, we just did not have time or that luxury to just chew clock. I think that was in the third quarter. And it's one thing to play that way when it's 10-10 going into the fourth quarter against Minnesota. So an entire different thing when you got 3 scores to make up, and yet you absolutely refuse to throw downfield against a terrible secondary.
Let me say this, Corey. Ryan, you mentioned 3 scores. Truthfully, that's almost inaccurate to say 3 scores. In theory, it's 3 scores because it was 24 points. But of course, to cover 24 points, you got to score 3 touchdowns and convert 3 times on 2-point plays.
Right.
So really, you're hard pressed to do it in 3 scores.
Mostly in 4 scores, but technically 3.
Technically 3, but the reality is it's going to take 4 scores. We didn't even try for the 2-point play, come to think of it.
Well, why didn't we try? Listen, an offense that struggles to move the football in the third quarter, you're down 24 points. Go for 2. I go for 2. Do we practice 2-point conversions, Don?
I'm sure we do. Yes.
Okay, go for 2. That bugged me, because you're banking on your offense getting, and I give them credit. They had 2 chances to go down the field, and I give the defense a lot of credit, because although they gave up plays, and Trey Palmer was terrific, and they took advantage of a couple of young guys in the secondary, for the most part, the defense stiffened up and gave the offense a chance. Now, how much of can I ask you this, Don, kind of segue here real quick, Ryan? I'll throw it back to you in this thing, but Don, how much of the comeback was based upon how Nebraska changed defensively throughout the game? Were they sitting back in a zone and kind of letting Iowa just keeping everything in front of them? Because Iowa never went over the top on them. What
Right.
did you see as far as what changed that Iowa started moving the ball with Padilla in that third quarter?
To me, what changed more than Nebraska's defense, to be with you, was their offense. All of a sudden, they went conservative. I know after the game, I heard part of the interview, their quarterback made the comment. He said, I was disappointed that we were very conservative with how we played in the second half because I thought we were going to throw for 400 yards in the game. And I could see where he thought that way, based on how the first half went. But they were pretty conservative in the second half. And, of course, they didn't run the ball that well. So there were any number of times where our defense put our offense right back out on the field. And that gave us more opportunities than what I was afraid we were going to get. As you know, we had a chance to tie the game up with our last two possessions. And we couldn't quite get it done, but we had that opportunity at least.
Anything else, Ryan?
And I have no doubt losing Cooper so early was a big factor in that. I thought they were really late switching TJ Hall off of Palmer. They should have put Riley Moss on him immediately because he was their best weapon downfield.
They don't do that, though. They don't do that, Ryan. We said that before the game. Don, I mean, we knew that wasn't going to happen. Phil
He
does not
switched
play.
later.
Well, we did that in 2017, too, after Purdue burned us like 4 times in a row. We're slow to react to that type of thing. As great as Phil
Right.
Parker is, Don, am I wrong on that, Coach?
Well, there is another option. You don't have to put Riley on number 3 wherever he goes, but what you can do without worrying about flipping corners is simply roll up those inexperienced corners and have somebody over the top, effectively doubling number 3. That's another alternative. And that, frankly, that's a very good alternative. Now, the only negative, of course, if you're going to double him, that means you're going to be in single coverage on the other side of the formation. But that's okay because the guy that was giving us fits was number 3. He's their best player, every receiver.
Ryan, I got to let you slide because I got a bunch of callers here, but I appreciate the time, and feel free to call in later if we hit a lull.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Thank you, sir. All right, let's move along to I don't have a name. I got a username. Grog Fisher. Grog Fisher. I can't imagine your name's not Grog, right?
No, it's Greg. How are you?
Okay, good. Greg, how are you?
Hey, I'm Corey. Don, nice to see you. I'm an Alabama resident. Grew up in Iowa for 26 years. Curious, does Iowa script its first offensive possession?
I honestly don't know. I don't think so, but I could be wrong.
Sure. And I also wondered, for the vast majority of Kirk's tenure, regardless of offensive coordinators, it seems the schemes have remained relatively similar regardless of Greg Davis, Ken O'Keefe, and now Brian. Do you think that the talent level that we're able to recruit dictates the scheme, or do you think the scheme basically, if we had quicker receivers on the outside that could create separation, that the scheme would change? I just wondered if what I was able to recruit, if that dictates the scheme that we do run at Iowa, or if we were able to get receivers on the edge that could create.
That's a tough question. Which comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah.
Obviously, in recruiting, we recruit players that fit our offensive profile. But I do know how Coach Fry felt, and I certainly always felt this way as a coach too. You've heard that simple expression, speed kills. There were times for sure when we recruited a guy that wasn't that big, but that did have great speed. Robert Smith comes to mind. And Robert, even though he was not a polished receiver, Robert did leave Iowa with 16 touchdown receptions and some kick returns and punt returns for touchdowns, and great push man, what we call a push man. You know, if you're going to throw any kind of flood schemes, you need somebody that can push the defense deep down the field. And obviously to do that effectively, you got to have somebody with speed to be able to do it. Robert Smith had that kind of speed. Quinn Early had that kind of speed, to name a couple. Bashir Yamini had that kind of speed, just to name three guys that really did an effective job of being a good deep threat and being an effective push man. So we don't have that very well available to us right now with the players that are in the program that are healthy. I did think it was, here's another thing you probably know. Keegan Johnson did get back on the field tonight. I don't know how many plays, not very many, but my frustration, and I did check just to be sure, look at the play-by-play, the ball never went his direction. I think maybe he only had maybe as many as 10 snaps, maybe not that many. But every time he was out there, I was noticing that he was in the game, and I was hoping, and there were snaps for sure when they played what we call man-free tight. You know, they played press coverage. They wound up on receivers across the board. There was only a free safety as their last line of defense back there. And so, in effect, we did have an opportunity to at least try to throw the ball over the top of the defense to a guy like Keegan. And maybe he was designed to be the receiver and the protection broke down. I don't know. But I don't recall us really even looking his way. It appeared he was never a primary receiver while he was out there.
Sure. Well, hey, I appreciate you guys. Every week I watch you from about 1,500 miles south, but I certainly enjoy your coverage, and I appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
Don, neither you or I are probably in the best of moods, although I might be in a slightly better mood because at least I watched Iowa basketball win. And by the way, for anybody who's wondering, the Iowa women did win 73-59, so they move on to their championship game tomorrow. The men will play in a championship game tomorrow, so there is good to talk about. Neither you or I are in a good mood, but when we hear fans across the country, across the globe that enjoy this show, I know you appreciate that, Don, as do I.
Absolutely.
Okay, we've got, let's go to Dave Valensky, who is on hold. Dave, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mr. Dave. How's it going?
Hey, Dave. How are you?
You're not in a – I'm sorry. I'm in a hotel in Madison, Wisconsin. So,
okay.
Yeah, I'm getting ready for the game. So you might click in and out. I'm sorry if it's not a great connection.
Okay. You got a question for Coach Patterson, Dave?
Got a coach talking about recruiting and how both basically the schools right now in the West are going to have to compete with the coming of USC and UCLA.
Well, as near as I know, we're going to expand to 16 teams when those two join us, and there is not going to be an East and West. Now that's going to be a scheduling nightmare. How do you somehow set it up so that all teams seem to have similar schedules? And of course, we're going to keep a few traditional rivalries. In our case, of course, I'd be shocked if Nebraska didn't play us every year from this point forward, just like Purdue and Indiana are going to play, and Minnesota and Wisconsin are going to play, Northwestern Illinois. I think those have all been defined as natural rivals. So those games, I think, will be played every year. But otherwise, isn't it odd that there are 15 different Big Ten teams that you might end up playing, and yet you can only play 9 of them in a season. I don't think that's going to change. I'm sure we're still going to have 3 non-conference games. So I don't know how they're going to put it all together.
You're going to have so many talks about tiebreaker scenarios and who's going to be the champion, who's going to be going to the championship game out of the two. Unless you could easily have a 4-team top of the race going into it.
Well, what I'd like to see UCLA and USC in the West, and at that point, nobody could complain that the East was a lot stronger than the West, and then we could simply move Purdue into the East, and now the West Coast schools would only have to fly halfway across the country.
Yeah.
And for that matter, the schools on the East Coast wouldn't have to fly all the way to the West Coast to play a divisional game. Now, obviously, you got to play some crossover games. I'm assuming it would be set up much like it is now. But I don't know how they're going to work it. It sounds like there will not be an East and a West. And at that point, you could see a really wide range of schedules from one team to the next. I don't know how they're going to make that play out.
And real quick before you, Dave, I got to hold on. To our caller who's on hold, if you're calling the phone line, I'm going to put you on hold. You're not going to hear the show. So I've had a couple callers hang up. I'm putting you on hold, caller. But I just want to let everybody know, if you're calling by telephone, don't hang up once you call. If you get through and you hear the show briefly and then dead air, you're on hold. So hang tight. So the phone line is busy. Dave, anything else? We got a bunch of callers waiting.
Basically say that, God dang it, we outplayed you guys last week and you still freaking win the game. I'm so upset.
That's the way the cookie crumbles, Dave.
Yeah, God, 8 years straight now. God, there already talks about a lot of people talking about getting rid of PJ over here. So I don't know what the hell's going to go on. I just don't think you can get rid of PJ. Who are you going to get? You know, who wants to come to Minnesota? I mean, that's going to be at the same level as PJ.
I appreciate the phone call, Dave. We're going to let you slide. Thank you, sir.
Okay, but
all right. Let's
Took
move
us a
on.
long time to figure out he was a Gopher fan. I didn't quite realize until he started talking about.
I knew he was a Gopher fan, Don.
Okay.
Let's get to our next caller who's on hold. Thank you for calling from the Hawk.
Somebody hang up on you, Corey?
Hello? Hello?
Sir.
Number.
Turn your radio down. Turn your computer down if you could, please.
Corey.
Hello? Yes. You're on the air.
My name is Richard, and I'm from Southwest Iowa.
Okay.
Hey, Coach.
How are you, Richard?
Good. How about you?
I'm not doing very well at the moment.
You guys, so. And I wish that was a big win. But it was sad we lost it.
Yes, sir.
But go Hawks. Hopefully we get a good bowl.
All right, sir. Do you have any question for Coach?
Go ahead. So what do you think need to be changed?
Don?
The question relates to what now? Just
what
talking
needs
about
to be changed. I mean, what needs to be changed? I think
On the offense.
Well, I'd like to see us be more aggressive with our play calling. I know you might argue that we were aggressive to start the game because we were throwing the ball more than running it. But when I say aggressive, I'm talking about trying to engineer some plays that have a chance to do something big, such as simply play action and deep throws, reverses, things like that to slow down the pursuit. I just would like to see more imagination with the offense. That's all. Try to challenge the other team more by having a better blend of run and pass.
I would agree. And I appreciate everything you guys do, and I enjoy watching you guys every week. And you guys do a fantastic job.
Well, we appreciate you listening, Richard.
And me and Jenny are a big fan of you. So.
Well,
I met Matt Rogers when I was young.
He's one of my favorite quarterbacks.
Yep. My dad dated his cousin at that time.
Wow.
Which was pretty cool.
There you go. Well,
that was a good one. He was a 2-time All Big Ten quarterback.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Richard,
So.
we appreciate you calling us, and feel free to call us on future shows.
All right, go Hawks.
Go Hawks, sir. Thank you. All right. Phone line is back open. The phone line was open. We're going to put you on hold, caller. So, again, if you are trying to get through in the phone line, it is busy at this moment. We've got people waiting. Again, I'm going to try to move through the calls somewhat succinctly. Let's get to Alex. Welcome to the show, Alex.
How's it going, gentlemen? How are you?
Good. And, Alex, before we get to your question, I want to give a quick plug to our sponsor, if you would, please. Just
you do you, sir.
Don't want to miss this opportunity to talk briefly about Brad Van Meter and his team down at State Farm in Des Moines. Again, giving you great rates. They've been in business for decades now. Give them a call, Brad Van Meter and his team at 515-256-6480. Let them help you save money. And, of course, State Farm, the biggest auto insurance company in the country. So call his team, and that's another way you can support the show here. Let him get you a quote and see what he can do as far as great insurance rates. All right, Alex, let's get back to your question.
Well, good evening, gentlemen. I wasn't on, didn't jump on until later, obviously, in the show. I'm usually one of the first few people that call, and I kind of don't know what to say, what's already been said. I think the two things, or a few things I want to say is, I'll say two people on the offense that absolutely wanted this game. That was Nico Ragaini and Luke Lachey. And I'm not saying that the other players didn't want it, but the way they were fighting, especially Luke Lachey fighting for that touchdown, Ragaini just trying to get those extra yards, just trying to juke people out their shoes. They were really wanting this victory. And I think I kind of feel bad for them because this offensive line, outside when they sent pressures on when they sent a zero blitz, or I know it's zero something, basically when they have no help over the top and they just send everybody to the quarterback. But when they were only rushing force, specifically later in the game, that offensive line was just letting somebody through. Usually it was one of the tackles. So, I thought about this and I says, according to me last week, man, if they would have had last week's offense, they would have won, right? My comments about how thought the offense played better than the defense, and I will come on the show and say I retract that statement. I think there was just how I think the offense played a little above than what I thought they would play, and the defense played below what I thought they would play. So that's where I'm coming from on that. But do you guys, Don? I don't know if you have a Twitter, but do you follow John Miller at all? He's in Iowa. I don't know. He's not a beat writer, but he covers Iowa. Corey, do you follow John Miller at all?
I know who he is. I don't follow him.
Well, so he said this during the game. I think it was right about halftime, close to it. He said he did four things. Number one, I don't want Iowa to lose. Number two, I don't want Iowa to lose. Three, if Iowa is going to lose, I want them to look as embarrassing on offense as possible. So that way changes you can't hide or you can't kind of hem-haw away about changes made. And number four, I don't want Iowa to lose. And I think a lot of fans are kind of feeling that when we don't want this team to lose, but it's at the same time we're afraid to win because then they can, KF can say, hey, we won 8 games this last year, we made it to the Big Ten championship game. So I don't know. Go ahead.
I've been saying that for a while. I don't blame anybody who became disinterested as the season went on, because when you're 3-4, the best you can do is 8-4, and they somehow find a way at winning 4 straight games and getting help from everybody else in the conference, finding a way to have a chance at the Big Ten West title. Honestly, a person could argue.
I was going to say, Corey, not just to have a chance, but to have fate in your own hands.
Yeah, and Don, in a typical year, the body of work would not have allowed them the opportunity they had today. So a lot of fans are looking at this, Don, and saying, the heck, we found a way to blow it. We found a way to blow an opportunity that in typical years we wouldn't have even gotten. I mean, and it's not like it's not like you blew a game against Wisconsin or Minnesota. You blew it against 3-8 Nebraska at home on senior day.
Right.
On senior day. I mean, you can't script that up. And Alex, listen, I have learned from a lot of fans who have said they're disinterested, and I don't question anybody's fandom. Like I say, if you're looking at the long-term interest of the program, I think the only real reasonable way that you could expect something to happen with Brian was if they lost today. Because I really do believe winning the West, regardless of how it looked, would have been the leverage. There's no way anybody was forcing Kirk's hand on moving Brian along. And I don't even know if his hand will be forced now. I don't know that at 7-5, because I mean, I don't know. I just don't know. It depends on how much leverage he actually has. Again, I said earlier, last I knew, he's got a clause in his contract which gets him a bonus every time he wins 7 games. So by his contract, by the lingo of his contract, this was a successful season, I guess. Because why would you give a coach a bonus for an unsuccessful season? So we've set the precedent for what is success by means of the language of his contract, Alex.
That's and I give all credit to Kirk Ferentz's agent, or if he has an agent, trying to squeak out that deal with Gary Barta. But and Don, Corey, I don't know what you listen to, like, for podcasts for sports. I liked listening to all the Big Ten podcast, or most of the Big Ten podcasts, just to kind of hear what they think about Iowa, and kind of maybe sadistically, like, listening to them after Iowa beats them to hear their excuses, just because I just find it entertaining. But I do listen to them, throughout the year, even when Iowa loses to them, to hear what they say. And I was listening. There's the Northwestern podcast, Westlatte Pirates. They were talking about, and Don, you may remember this era, like in the 80s and 90s, maybe in the late 70s, where they call it the dark ages, where Northwestern was just a horrible team because they refused to change. And I'm not saying that Iowa is in that spot right now, but I think the refusal to change, if nothing happens this offseason, maybe, does it happen? I don't think so, but it kind of like it makes you think. And then the last couple things is that I kind of felt bad for Alex Padilla, because one, when he was scrambling, it was kind of nice to see. It's like, hey, someone who could move outside the pocket. But at the same time, he had, like, some green grass ahead of him. And then maybe late in the game, you don't want to put your quarterback at risk and then, have the clock keep running because you don't have timeouts. But it looked like he was trying to avoid running for a first down or running to get some yards out of anything. And I don't know if that's coaches telling him to do that or if it was just his mental status. And I think with him too, the very vast differences between him and Spencer, not only with his mobility, is his size. And we saw that on display today. How many times balls got tipped up. That one screen pass after Iowa got that fumble, if that would have been completed, Iowa possibly could have gotten a touchdown off of that and made it real interesting. But because he's so short, you can tell his offensive lineman's up here and he's like down here. So that, I think he's a okay-ish quarterback. Is he at Spencer's level? I can't, not going to say yes or no because we've only seen him very, very briefly. But yeah,
that's another, let me just say this. It's another failure on the Iowa coaching staff. The fact that Padilla's only meaningful snaps this year came when you were down,
by
3 scores at Ohio State and 3 scores against Nebraska. That's not fair to Alex Padilla. And I don't care about evaluating him. And let me tell you something else. I'm not saying Padilla is better than Petrus. I think they're both right now. Neither one of them look like Big Ten quarterbacks. Okay, that's just my thought on it. But I'll say this: that throw on the sidelines that he made to Bruce that was overturned. And by the way, for the record, my opinion in response to Uncle Rico here, he says, anyone else think that catch by Bruce shouldn't have been overturned? No, I thought it was the right call to overturn it. The ball moved. Again, I don't want to be right on that, but I'm just saying I thought it was the right call when you looked at the replay. I thought it was obvious. Commentators did not, but I thought it was obvious. But that's a play Petrus would have never made, Alex. He would have never been able to make that play. So if we want to ask the question, what's the upside? Plays like that. Oh, that's the upside right there.
Yeah. No, but it's funny that you Brian Ferentz's comment. So I mean, you watched it on TV, Don. I don't know what video angles you can see. I know you probably watched it on TV as well, but they only showed the one angle because Dean Blandino says they have different camera angles where they could look at it. And from one camera angle I saw, it was kind of like, well, it was inconclusive, so they must have saw another camera angle, which I would like to see. You know, I'm not saying it would probably change my mind on anything, but I would kind of like to see what the other camera angles look like on that as well.
Well, Don, you were at the game, right? You weren't on TV. You were at the game.
I was at the game, yes.
Yeah. So you haven't been able to watch it back on replay yet. So
in real time, as I looked at the replays, I thought I saw a ball that was not quite possessed that did hit the turf without being in the possession of Ireland.
Well, his right foot out of bounds. So he had the ball in his left hand or in both hands, then he moved it, and the ball, when he had the ball kind of in his left or right hand, the ball was not possessed, and then the foot went out. So he never repossessed it until, even if he did repossess it after that point, the right foot was out of bounds. So I thought it was the right call. I thought it was
I had the sneaking suspicion that they were going to overturn it based on my own observation of the video.
Yeah.
Not that it was easy to see, but I just felt that they were probably going to overturn it.
Well, and the last thing I'll say is that this was a very un-Iowa game in the sense of the penalties. You know, Iowa pinned Nebraska back in their own, almost to their own end zone, and then they punt the ball, and we get that personal foul, that leaping. Was it the punting shield? I've heard about leaping the center, and I get that one, but leaping the punting shield was Sebastian Castro. Now, whether or not he got helped over, which I think Kirk Ferentz was trying to argue, I'm just saying that's, whether you think he did that or not, it's like it was just so self-inflicted wounds of just like, hey, we stopped it on third down. Oh, there's a flag. Oh, we have a defensive pass interference, a defensive hold. Don, I think you were, as a former Iowa guy, Iowa coach, you're probably pulling your hair out, because it's such an un-Iowa, undisciplined Iowa team today. And it was it's so bizarre to see, and plus all the turnovers as well. I think it was the 4 total, two fumbles, an interception, and then there was another one I can't think. Oh, the botched punt. And it's just like kind of it was a comedy of errors. So, but I like I said, I can come on. I think I can probably say everything that everybody else has been said. But the last thing I'll say is that Brian Ferentz needs to go, and then George Barnett really needs to be scrutinized, because I understand in college you get a couple of years to kind of implement a system. Not like the NFL where you automatically have talent. This is college is a game where you have to build up into a scheme. Well, this is the second year of George Barnett, and arguably the offensive line is playing worse than what they did last year. And that's saying something with some returning, a good returning pieces. Yes, we did lose Tyler Linderbaum. I understand that. Kyler Schott not coming back for an extra year does hurt, but we've had most of that offensive line has had experience last year. And Jack Plum, I don't know if he has a year of eligibility left, but I hope he doesn't come back. Same thing with Spencer. No disrespect to the kid. He plays tough, but I know he can come back next year if he really wants to and take that COVID year. But it's like one of those where it's, there's that video of the Iowa fan after the Purdue game talking to David Bell, goes, "Hey, you're a great player. Please go to the NFL." I think a lot of fans would be with Spencer and specifically with Jack Plum, say, "Hey, we appreciate what you've done with Iowa. Please move on. No disrespect, but move over to the other guy."
The problem is, though, Alex, that Jack Plum, you brought up Jack Plum, and I'm not picking on Jack Plum. You brought him up, but you're asking, you don't want him to come back. He's a 5th-year senior. And
this is the level you're going to produce at?
Whose fault is that? Is that Jack Plum's fault? Because ain't nobody performing. And guess what? Apparently the guys behind him aren't any good. So what does that tell you? Well, somebody's not developing these guys, right?
And that's why I brought up George Barnett.
Center. We're on the same. Well, you blame George Barnett. George Barnett's only been here 2 years. Jack Plum's been here 5.
Fair enough. But in 2 years, we have the offensive line, like I said, arguably has not. We've actually regressed. and our offensive line development. Personally, that's what I think. So I think, I'm not saying he needs to be fired, but he needs to be heavily scrutinized.
Well,
for this year.
After Brian is held. I mean, Brian's been here. This is what, going into year 6?
Yeah. Oh, no, 7. This is year 7. Because he started in 2017. So this is year 7.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the buck stops with Brian, and I hate to say that, but anyways, Alex, appreciate the phone call, sir, as always.
Hey, thanks I know I stayed on a little longer, and I appreciate it. Oh, last thing, why wasn't Caleb Johnson in the first half? He played very little in the first half, and then they took him out after that big run, and they put in Gavin Williams when they were passing. I think he can catch the ball and run, but maybe you guys can discuss that after I get off. But thanks for taking my call.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, Andre says the same thing. Caleb Johnson runs for 109 on 16 carries. In 3 quarters, does not touch the ball in the 4th. Obviously, you're in comeback mode. You kind of abandon the run a little bit, Don. But, their usage of Caleb Johnson since he had his breakout game against Purdue has been baffling. And that's one thing has been a point of contention or frustration for me over the years, is it seems like as seasons progress, some of Iowa, at least what we perceive as fans to be their best skill position players, at times are underutilized as the season progresses. I think of 2018 with Noah Fant. As the year goes on, he kind of just disappears into thin air, and then a few months later, he's a first-round draft pick. Caleb Johnson's a good example. Has his usage been strange to you, Don, given how he's played as the season has gone on? Because he's been productive when he's gotten the ball.
I do think LeSean had some very nice runs today. In Caleb's case, of course, 44 yards on one of those carries. That left 65 yards on the other 15 carries. So if you eliminate the 44-yarder, then their productivity was very similar. I think there are some plays, some situations in which LeSean actually has an edge on Caleb. He's got unusual ability to make a guy miss, more so than LeSean, more so than Caleb, rather. Caleb is more capable of running you over, of course, and does have a little better top end speed. So they both have a good place in their offense. I don't think there's I don't have much issue with both of them playing a lot, having the vast majority of the snaps. I have no issue with Caleb getting a few more snaps than LeSean because I think they're a good 1-2 punch. The unfortunate situation we're in, Gavin, I think in terms of running ability is behind those two. But our dilemma is that Gavin understands the offense better than either one. It's one reason you saw Gavin in there in the 4th quarter is because, of course, he's deemed to be a better pass protector, if that's the job, and for that matter, a little better coming out of the backfield as a receiver. So that's our dilemma. The 2 younger backs are not quite as savvy or experienced as Gavin is.
All right, we got a caller on hold. We've got Vincent and Jared. Let's add Vincent to the mix. Vincent, welcome back to the show, sir.
Gentlemen, how you doing? I'll just dive right into it if I can.
Sure.
Okay, so I guess first thing is, and this is not in defense of Brian by any stretch, but one thing I've noticed as far as or from the quarterback position, there's a reason Padilla is behind Petrus. It's just based off of arm talent, as well as Petrus sees the field a little bit better than Padilla does. And I know Don touched on it a couple of weeks ago, talking about how a quarterback's able to read a defense. We just don't have the horses at the quarterback position that are able to get the job done. And again, this is not in defense of Brian, but I saw too many instances today where you have receivers that are coming open or breaking open, and the quarterback's unable to anticipate that break with that receiver coming open, and he's just missing it and not getting it to him. And also that's a microcosm of the offensive line woes. But on those plays, I saw Padilla go onto another receiver, or the same with Petrus before he exited. And then secondly, the one thing I was very surprised with from a defensive standpoint is, or not Phil Parker. Yeah, Phil, not Norm. Phil Parker generally doesn't do a whole lot of blitzing, but today it seemed like we brought pressure far more than we're used to seeing, and it really hurt us, especially with Palmer going for $150, whatever he went for. But very unorthodox from Phil Parker, where I thought I couldn't understand why we kept bringing pressure and we were not getting to the quarterback, and we just kept getting burned by it, but yet we kept doing the same thing.
Don, you want to address that first, and then we can go back to the Padilla-Petrus conversation?
The disadvantage I had, if you're sitting at home and watching on TV, you can back it up. You can look at it over and over again. If I only saw it in real time. So I'm not really sure that that's a true statement. It may be true. I'm just not sure of that. Here's what I do know. They did a good job. I give them credit. Their offensive coordinator did a good job of targeting Palmer. He had 12 balls go his way. He caught 9 of them for 165 yards. A lot of key plays. We're at fault for not taking him away. We could have done it a couple of different ways. We could have put Riley Moss on him, wherever he was. Or the simpler way to get it done, as I mentioned, is simply to roll the coverage in his direction. When I say roll the coverage, I mean the inexperienced corner would not be in deep coverage. He would not be in single coverage. He would be flat responsible. He would beat on Palmer with his release, and then there'd be a safety over the top to play him on deeper throws. That would obviously negate Palmer to some degree. He's still a good player. He still makes some catches, but it would have been obvious at that point to Whipple that they're making an effort to be sure that Palmer does not get single coverage. So I think we're kind of beating our head against the wall if we keep trying to get the ball to Palmer all day long, because effectively they're rolling the coverage his way and they're giving him the respect that he deserves. We didn't really do that. They continually set the ball Palmer's way, and it paid off for him.
Well, on the 87-yard touchdown, we didn't have a safety over the top.
Correct.
So and that's your first, for me as a defensive coordinator. I'm looking at, okay, we have single coverage on the outside with a freshman, and we're, to my recollection, and I could be wrong, we brought pressure, which really burned us. And I'm sure you'll review tape now, but you'll see we brought pressure more often than we normally see from an Iowa defense. And same thing on Palmer's second touchdown, more so of a miscommunication. I think with the underneath coverage, either with Jack Campbell or Kemp, I know both those guys were sitting in the same area when he ran by him and scored his second touchdown. But again, we didn't have a safety over the top. We ended up with single coverage on the outside, and it just burned us. And I can't recall if that one there was an instance where we brought pressure, but I saw on many occasions where we're bringing pressure either from a linebacker or our cash position, and it was just ineffective. But yet we kind of, for some reason, we're sticking with that. And then Corey, I'll turn it over to you about the Padilla-Petrus comment.
Yeah, I mean, Don, you're a QB's coach. I shouldn't even talk on this. I just don't agree with you, Vincent. That's probably not the first time you and I.
That's all right. That's all right.
But I don't think either of them are probably starting Big Ten quarterbacks. But I like the upside of what Padilla gives you in his mobility more than anything I've seen. I've gotten to see Spencer Petrus for 3 years now, and you know what? The fact that you have a quarterback room that is well below average, and that's putting it nicely, is an indictment on Brian Ferentz. That's who it's an indictment on. He's the QB's coach. He's the OC. He's been the OC now for 6 years. I don't know how else we can put it. We can blame, I'm not saying you're doing this, Vincent, but these people that want to blame players, we're blaming Jack Plum, or we're blaming Petrus, or we're blaming Padilla. I get it. Those guys aren't performing, and execution is execution. But Don, you're a former coach. Doesn't it ultimately fall back on when multiple guys are not ready for the moment? When you've got problems across your offensive line, and you've got problems in your QB's room, and your receivers aren't getting separation.
Right.
What's the common denominator, Don, across all these different position groups? At some point, when is that going? I mean, I know some people recognize it, but there are people that, we just got to execute better. Well, that's coaching.
Yeah, I reflect back on Coach Fry. Coach Fry would say, you're getting paid a nice salary, and your job is to be sure that your position is not a weak link on our football team. Matter of fact, your goal should be that it's the strongest possible link. And, you felt a lot of pressure as a coach to be sure that your guys were not going to be the problem on Saturday. Obviously, it's not always easy to accomplish, but that's your goal as a coach. And if you routinely fall short, then you can bet that there was going to be a coaching change. That coach simply wouldn't be around, because his job is to make sure his players do not let down the program with how they play. And one comment about Padilla, I know my wife made the comment. Of course, she's seen a lot of football games. She said, I really like number 11 for how he plays quarterback, because he's got really, really good feet. And he did. We tried to get to him, but he's just a very athletic quarterback. He's a guy that understands how to extend plays. And obviously he's got the capability of throwing the ball with good accuracy all over the field. He did that today. He did a nice job as a quarterback. One reason we lost today is because their quarterback play was clearly better than ours. And I'm not just talking about him versus Padilla. Let's give Spencer a lot of credit for how he started the game. It was an atrocious start on offense. And I think Spencer would even say, I didn't do anything to help us because I was off with how I was playing in that first quarter. So we got off to a horrible start. And the one thing I give Alex a lot of credit, I thought, considering he hadn't played in a game since Ohio State, I thought he gave a commendable effort. He's running around, he's running for his life, but let's face it, he extended the play a lot. And even though he threw a little less than 50%, how many of those were throwaways? Because he simply didn't have a place to go with the ball. So I give Alex a lot of credit for trying to play as well as he possibly could. Obviously, he'd be the first to tell you I'm not anywhere near a perfect player, but I think he was trying to do the best he could. And the unfortunate thing is that Alex didn't have more snaps over the course of the season. I'll remind you again, in the Nevada game, he didn't take a snap. And that's just one example of a good opportunity that was missed. Alex should have played in that game and didn't. And it's unfortunate because he would have been a little better prepared to play today if he'd had more snaps over the course of the season.
Well, just to clarify, Corey, I'm not one of those who's blaming a specific player, because there's too many at-fault parties here, and it goes into the coaching staff. What you saw from, is it Casey Thompson, right? The QB for Nebraska. He's a confident kid, confident quarterback, and confidence breeds success. He knew where he was going. He knew where he wanted to go. He knew he had the ability to get it there. And you guys are both right. Padilla looked better in the second half when they actually allowed him to throw the ball more. But again, for me, not a specific player. I just think, and I think Corey, you kind of said it maybe earlier on. Are these guys legit Big Ten quarterbacks? No. I think our whole quarterback room altogether, unfortunately, for the University of Iowa, just doesn't have that guy yet. And I don't know about Labus. I've heard things of Labus, but nobody's seen him except for probably high school tape. But we just don't have a solid quarterback room. Either one of these guys are, in my opinion, doing a good job of, and again, in defense of Padilla, he hasn't had the opportunities. But just being able to, anticipation is, I think, a key attribute a quarterback has to have. And these Petrus just never developed it in his 17 years at Iowa, and Padilla never had the opportunity. But that was just kind of my observation from today.
I appreciate the call, Vincent. And
thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Thank you, sir. All right. We've got, let's see. We lost Jared. Jared is not with us anymore. Let's get to our next caller who's been on hold. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson, who's on the line.
Lomansky, Corey.
Lomansky, how you doing?
Good. I'm going to try to be brief because usually I'm not. And good evening to Dandy Don. Just so appreciative of both of you manning the after-game comments, and I think everybody learns a lot and maybe steadies the ship a little bit of what actually goes on. I don't think we talk enough about Gary Barta. I mean, these are youngsters. We've got adult males coaching. We've got an athletic director in charge of 20-plus programs. And I guess I'm going to take it out of a little bit out of Kirk's wheelhouse as far as the coaches. You know, it's Gary Barta has a job to do. Every AD has a job to do. To me, the hottest spotlight going forward is on Gary Barta. The thing about Alex Padilla, actually, I missed most of the game. I had to work, had to listen to Dolph and Podolak. When you have injuries in football, and Don, I went back and looked at the number of quarterbacks you played early on in your tenure at Iowa. Pete Gales, Gordy Bohannon shared a lot of snaps. They both improved at a certain pace. They had different skill sets like Padilla and like Spencer. Wouldn't you agree, Don? They had different, I think you shook your head up and down about skill sets of Gales and Bohannon. Plus, I believe even Chuck Long got in very briefly one year. You know, you're going to have injuries. So when you don't put any quarterback in, I don't care if it's Alex or other quarterbacks, and there's opportunities, don't put it on the youngsters. Do not calm down here. Do not put that on Alex Padilla today. And I missed half the game. I think Corey and I, actually, Don, you actually talked about it several times about packages on the offensive side of the football. I don't care if you might not have talked about Lachey, but I can see Lachey getting certain routes because he's young, and some of those young quarterbacks get in the game. So again, I think Alex Padilla got put in a terrible situation. It's all on the coaching staff on the offensive side of the ball. Turn around and look at Aaron Graves getting snaps on the defense side of the ball and other players.
Well, there's a double, Lemansky, there's a complete double standard at Iowa as it relates to when the backups play, because I'm sorry, TJ Hall gets burned twice, and listen, TJ Hall got burned. I mean, Don, is that fair? He got beat twice.
I don't know that the second one was his fault. I'm talking about the post.
But Don, what happened?
I'm not sure about the coverage. For sure, the first one was on him.
Okay, but what happened when he got burned? 1 or 2 times. What happened?
He got replaced.
He got replaced. And yet, Spencer Petras was allowed to do whatever he wanted to do. And it took 2 horrendous interceptions and a 3-possession deficit at Ohio State for Iowa to finally make a move, and an injury today to Petras to make a move. I think that's inexcusable. And if the excuse that Iowa wants to use is, well, the quarterback position is different because we just don't have guys behind him, then that falls back on the position coach. And correct me if I'm wrong, Brian Ferentz is a position coach, Lemansky. That's just, I agree with everything you just said. We're putting, you put your guys in positions to succeed or you don't. Brian and Kirk have consistently, at least publicly, not instilled any confidence in Alex Padilla, right? The comments that have been made have been, I think, somewhat insulting to him. And you could argue that it's somewhat of a trend, because there was a comment made about a year ago at this time to Iowa's third-string running back in 2021 that was insulting. And to me, it just falls back on your coaching. And I understand Iowa had a different QB's coach last year. His name was Ken O'Keefe. But this year, the QB's coach is Brian Ferentz. And I am frustrated by the same thing you're frustrated by, Lemansky.
Well, I compliment you, Corey, because you and I talked about when I went from 8-3, when I went from 8-4 to 7-5, 8. I think I have to do the math different, but 12 games. I went down to 7-5, and you said, don't feel bad about that record, because you and I saw the same thing. We saw a weakness that we kept overcoming it. And the law of averages, you go back to the mean, and today we got caught. And I think the thing that concerns me the most is that Gary Barter's our athletic director. And the second thing is, I do understand the philosophy of Iowa football. Don can speak about the philosophy under Hayden Fry. I can't get into that, but it sure appears to me I can speak on, we don't want mistakes. We run the ball. We have a great defense, and let's just not risk it for a biscuit. I'm taking a professional line there out of professional football of a coach. And yeah, it served Iowa well for many, many years. But at a certain point, what concerns me the most is, were we just not recruiting good enough in the offensive line? That's been Iowa's bread and butter, going way back to the strength of lines that Don knows he had to have to make all the skilled players go. And I love our running back room. I hope Jazzian sees the field. I'll compliment our running back room, but I think all Iowa fans should really start studying and worrying about, are we not recruiting good enough in the offensive line? I don't think we are. Are we not developing in the offensive line? I don't think we are. I can't understand why. And I tell you, this Caden Proctor thing, that will light a fire under the Iowa fans if we can't. We already have a QB down at TCU that's undefeated. Iowa State didn't keep him in state. Iowa didn't keep him in state. And he's undefeated at TCU. But I want to end on a good note, because you two, I think I heard on ESPNU radio, if you have talent and you're still humble, you got greatness. And you as a duo to the Iowa fan base, you deliver that. And Corey, you don't like to take credit. I like that about you, but you get calls from all throughout the country. There's so many podcasts to listen to, and you two gentlemen are just you're a blessing to Iowa football. And I'll hang up and listen and have a little bit of faith. I get kind of disturbed when people say, I'm not going to watch him anymore. Or, Don had a rough first year at Iowa. He had to take somebody else's talent and do the best job he can and go into year two. And thank you, Don, for being a plotter and a persistent coach, because I know that first year you're probably wondering, what the hell did we move to Iowa City for? Because we got so many challenges all over. I got to fix a lot of stuff. So thanks for all you do. I'll hang up and listen.
Thank you, Lemansky. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
And we are going to roll along here, but I do appreciate hearing that from Lemansky. And do I seem frustrated this evening, Don?
I think we're all a little frustrated.
And maybe I'm being more outspoken than people want me to be. I haven't changed my tune on the situation. I just, regular season's over. I understand you're still playing for a bowl game. They could still win the West, Don. If somehow Illinois and Purdue lose tomorrow, but boy, oh boy, I can't even imagine. And caller, I'm going to put you on hold. We'll get to you in a second. Again, I'm not trying to be unfair to Kirk and Brian. Again, it's nothing personal. I'm not calling for Kirk to be fired. I'm not doing that. I am calling for them to make a change at OC. I was calling for that 2 months ago. So in regards to this question, the super chat, can Iowa recruit regarding to NIL? No. So I'm guessing that's kind of a rhetorical question. Regarding to NIL. So I'm assuming he or she is asking, can Iowa compete with the bigger programs as it relates to NIL funding? And, I don't know how you answer that, Don. There's money to be had in Iowa, but no, they're not going to be competing with some of the blue blood programs out there. And certainly there's lucrative deals that are being done that probably are not according to the rule book, if you will. But the NCAA is not regulating this stuff. And, recruiting is recruiting. I understand that. But they've also recruited decently well along that offensive line. That's been well documented, Don. We've talked about their struggles in developing some of these guys, some 4-star guys
Right.
that have come here and have not panned out. So we can talk recruiting. The rankings say Iowa's been recruiting decently well in recent time. But
Correct.
You've got to coach these guys up, and certainly it's being done on the defensive side of things. I'd argue that our tight ends are very well coached. I think you would agree with that, Don. I think our backs, for the most part, appear to be well coached.
Corey, let me take a minute to brag on a couple of guys. And one of our callers made the same observation that I had. As the game wound down, I was so proud of 2 offensive players in particular, and that would be Luke Lachey and Nico Ragaini. Those guys were playing. It was almost like they were possessed. Maybe that's not a good description, but they were playing with fanatical effort. I'll say that. They were not nearly ready to give up the ghost, and they played that way. Luke had 10 targets, caught 7 balls for 89 yards. Nico had 12. He was targeted 12 times, 7 catches for 60 yards. And as you know, a really good effort after the catch on both their parts. I was just really proud of those 2 in particular. They really did a nice job today. Hats off to them.
And I do think, can we agree?
If everybody played at that same high level, we'd have won the game today. I'll say that.
I guess, and you obviously need to spend a longer period of time evaluating if you're making decisions in the, at the top, if you're Gary Barta or even Kirk Ferentz. But would you agree with that assessment right now, Don, that Liddell Betts is, at least it appears that he's doing a good job collectively? I know he's still kind of young at this thing, but he's recruited good talent. They appear to be playing well. You could argue the same thing now. Abdul Hodge just got here, right? But the tight ends are certainly performing well, and they tend, Addison Estringa is a true freshman, and he's been able to play and contribute. But you have to look at the offensive line, you have to look at quarterback, and you have to look at wide receiver. You really got to look at wide receiver because
correct.
They got problems, and they've got now 3 commitments in the class of 2023. I hope they all pan out. But recruiting-wise, they have struggled mightily at that position. And, Don, you're at all these home games. There's a lack of wide receiver separation. I mean, not to say that there's never throws that are there that aren't made by Spencer Petras or Alex Padilla, but can we agree that wide receiver separation is still a problem?
Yes, it's a problem.
So all these things need to be looked at through a microscope. And honestly, Kelton Copeland is not immune to this. His job,
he's been here a while.
His job should very much be in question. I'm not saying he should be fired, but he should be evaluated, just like Brian Ferentz should be evaluated. George Barnett, I think he deserves another. My personal opinion is 2 years isn't long enough, but Kelton Copeland's a guy that we haven't talked about. He's regardless of the offense, and I understand it's hard to recruit receivers to Iowa. They have struggled at that position. So, this is not a game. You got it. People are getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to coach these guys. And if they're not doing a good enough job, you've got to, I understand this. There's a lot of family and friends involved with Iowa football, but at some point you've got to see results on the field. Let's get to our next caller who's on hold. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson, who's on the line.
This is Hawkeye Stan.
Hey, Stan.
I love you guys. I love the show. You guys, it's sort of nice to see you going through the process of grieving right now and just getting it all out of our system for what a horrible season this ended up being. And I think it was the Ohio State loss that was the heartbreaker for me, because you saw, this defense it's the best Iowa defense I had ever seen. And I've been an Iowa fan for 30 years. So, I don't have a lot of good history on before that, but in my lifetime, it was the best defense. And against Ohio State, after all those turnovers and how they still kept getting the ball back for our offense and we couldn't do anything. And I think now, we had a good little win streak there, had a little hope. And this loss to Nebraska has, it's just brought everyone back to the actual reality of the situation we're in. Sorry, I didn't mean to rant.
No, you're fine. And what you just brought up, Stan, is the difference between how people view situations. You just called this season a horrible season. I don't know that I'd go that far, but there are some people that would say 7-5 is a successful season. As I said, I've said 3 times now, the language in Kirk Ferentz's contract would tell you that 7-5 is a successful season. So that's the not the stopgap, but that's the dilemma that you've got, because you got different perspectives as to what success is, and fans disagree on that subject as well. But obviously, we know where Iowa stands. We know where Gary Barta stands, and where Kirk stands. 7-5, 8-4 is good enough, right? I mean, for the most part, it appears to be good enough.
I think let me clarify, I guess, what made it the horrible season was that we had such a beautiful defense that if we had just a 60th top ranked offense, who knows what we could have done, against an Ohio State, against Michigan. There was possibility there, but when your offense was as bad as it was this year, rough year for offense, it's that whole defense, it was wasted. It was a wasted year. I think that, to me, I'm a guy that when I watch football, I love watching a defense take control and adjust. And that's what Iowa's been good at for years. But this year it was clicking on all cylinders, and we just could not help them out at all, any game.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, you're right. I mean, Northwestern, they ran the ball well, but didn't need help. I mean, the defense dominated that game as well. That was a late touchdown for Northwestern. It was a garbage touchdown, but for the most part, defense was tremendous in that game. And you're right, Jan. You've brought that up in the past. When's the last time the offense has saved the defense? Like, when's the last time that's happened at Iowa?
Hadn't happened much lately, that's for sure.
I think it's been at least, I don't know. I don't think it happened at all last year. I know it didn't happen at all last year. You'd probably have to go back to maybe 2020 during the COVID year where the run game was working. Maybe there's a game in there where Iowa's defense struggled, but it's been years.
Anyway, I love you guys' show. I'll let you go.
Thank you for the call, sir. Appreciate it. All right. Before we get to Jared, you are coming up next. I do have a couple questions for you, Don, here on this game specifically. So we talked about the leap over the punt shield, which you can you comment on that briefly? You've never heard of that rule.
I just didn't get it. I wasn't sure what the explanation was. As I saw it, I thought, I guess I wasn't aware that was a new rule. I'm just confused about what constitutes the violation. You're saying you can't leave your feet to block a punt? Is that what they're saying?
Caller, I'm going to put you on hold. Don, I don't have an explanation other than the actual call was, I believe, leaping over the punt shield. So I don't know the ins and outs of the rule. But I will say this: if Kirk didn't act like he didn't know what the rule was, it looked like commentators implied that he was arguing that Castro had been lifted up, and I don't buy that. We watched a replay; it appeared that Castro did leap over the punt shield. But again, as it relates to your question, I've never heard of that rule either. Now, I guess I may be confusing leaping over the punt shield with leaping over the center, right? There is the long snapper, right? You can't.
Right.
What's the rule about leaping over the long snapper or jumping on the long snapper? What's the rule on that, Don?
Well, the snapper's protected. You're not supposed to even be anywhere near him in terms of contact. I don't know if you can. He's protected. You cannot hit the snapper immediately after he snaps the ball. I do know that. As far as leaping over the snapper or anyone else in their front, it seems like sometimes you see guys do that. I can't recall anybody being flagged for it, so I don't know what the rule is. These are rules that are changed to promote safety, of course. That's the whole purpose of not allowing anybody to leap over the shield. Theoretically, they're trying to protect the punt blocker as much or more than anyone because he might get up into the course and land head first. But it seems to me like I just assumed, well, it's only going to be a 5-yarder. At the time, I think they needed 14 yards for a first down. So even when the flag flew, I thought, well, it's a 5-yarder. There's no way they can flag us for roughing the kicker. So I assume at the worst, they'd end up punting again, 5 yards closer to the goal line, but they still have to punt. But then when it became a 15-yarder, I was surprised. So I'm not really very good position to comment on it because maybe it's a rule change that I'm simply not aware of. Of course, I haven't coached in a while. So that's a rule that I don't recall being in place back in time.
Lemansky, appreciate the super chat. He says, I stated 7-5 after the Buckeye blowout. Depth on the offensive line of the ball smells of poor recruiting. Padilla deserves snaps in 22. Like Hayden professed, I too will always be a Hawk. Yeah, that gets me every time to hear that speech from Coach Fry, and I saw that that was the anniversary of that the other day, Don.
Yes.
One more thing before we get to Jared, and we got a caller on hold on our phone line. If you're going to run empty, why would you not give Alex Padilla a QB draw at some point?
Good point. Because you're certainly inviting a pass rush at that point. And we made the point in the past, empty with Spencer in the gun made little or no sense because he was no threat to run. Well, clearly, Padilla's a pretty good runner. He's a better runner, that's safe to say. And since we didn't do it throughout the game, it would have made even more sense to do it, especially late in the game, because Padilla, of course, had the capacity to turn a Q draw into a significant gainer for us. But at any rate, it didn't happen. So maybe that's something we can use in the ball game, I guess.
Let's get to Jared. Appreciate you hanging tight, Jared, for so long. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Corey. How you guys doing?
We're hanging in there, Jared.
Yeah. Well, I'll start off the call by saying I'm saddened. And A, I'm saddened by the loss. And B, I'm saddened by you guys having the last live stream. Because your content is... Yeah, I mean, we don't have a Big Ten championship game to look forward to, which I assumed we would have after today, but clearly that didn't happen.
Well, we have a bowl game.
Yeah, but I mean, this had to have been one of the more disappointing losses in Iowa football lore, in my opinion. I don't know how you guys feel, but really a really disappointing loss.
Yeah, I mean, where does it rank for you, Don?
Well, I think I made the comment the other day. The reason I was so confident, 3 Rose Bowls in Coach Fry's 20 years, and I'm pretty sure in 2 of those 3, we clinched it on the last day. We needed to win to go. I know that was true in 81. We had to beat Michigan State to go, and we did. And I'm pretty sure one of those other 2, we also had to win on the last day of the regular season and did. I think the one time we failed to win, I believe we had it clinched the week before, as I recall. I have to go back, but you heard me say this even this week. I have great confidence in our ability to beat Nebraska because I do know that our character on this football team is as good as any you'll find anywhere, not just in our conference, but anywhere in college football. I felt strongly about that. So the disappointment was that we didn't get it done, and we only have ourselves to blame. You can give a lot of credit to Nebraska because they played an inspired game, certainly at times. But I'm sure the players on our side would simply say that we didn't get it done. We failed to accomplish what we were required to do, and that's on us. We have to take responsibility for that. We can't just give all credit to Nebraska because that's the same Nebraska team, of course, that lost 6 out of 9 conference games. They ended up 3-6, and one of those 3 wins was against us. So we have to live with that. We have to assume responsibility for what happened today.
Yeah, I appreciate that take, Don. And Corey, you had mentioned in many of your videos this past week, and I felt the ominous of how this game could be bad for us because, Casey Thompson was coming back. He's a very talented quarterback. And Iowa's defense has been on the field, the whole season, just making miracles happen. And then, of course, the luck ran out today. And I agreed with you when you had to take – I think you said they're going to win by 3, which could have been true. But,
I'll say this, Jared, and I don't want to be right on these things. And I've been wrong before. Certainly, I was wrong last year about this time. I made a prediction that Iowa would find a way to upset Michigan, and I don't ever make. I rarely make my picks based on my gut, Jared. So I went with my head on my pick this week for the Nebraska game, and I was wrong. I had Iowa by winning by 3. But Don, I'm okay with you telling our listeners this. I had a conversation with you, I believe, after I published my my official picks. What did I tell you about my feelings on this game?
I recall you saying you had concerns about it, and you wouldn't be surprised if Nebraska pulled it off.
Yeah. As the week went on, I just, again, thinking I said this on the show as well, but assuming Casey Thompson was healthy, and it appeared to be healthy today, I had big concerns. But again, your head tells you, boy, this is a 3-8 Nebraska team that finds a way to lose games, but big plays. And they made big plays. And that, honestly, the game kind of panned out the way I sort of expected it to, minus the Cooper DeJean injury. Had he not gone down, you're probably looking at a much closer game. But Iowa was not running away. They were not running away with this game, Jared, because they can't run away with games. I know they kind of ran away with the Northwestern game, but boy, that offense. Sometimes a blind squirrel finds a nut, but for the most part, it's going to be hard for that offense to pull away from anyone, and that is not a good Nebraska defense that they play today.
Well, absolutely, you're 100% right. I mean, it's a deplorable offense. And honestly, I was watching the game at a sports bar, and people are laughing at Iowa. But I said, don't count these guys out. Maybe the defense will make a few plays or two. And they came back, to be fair. I mean, it was 24-0, and Petrus got injured. And they came back to make it a really close game. Could have had a chance at the end. That's just the Iowa brand of football that they do. And so it's unfortunate that they lost. But, man, they always make it tight.
Yeah, like you said, Don, a lot of that's character, right? And I've given Kirk due credit. He deserves credit for helping this team win 4 straight, right? He deserves credit for not letting this thing completely derail. That doesn't take away from the fact that the team is still 7-5, despite having maybe the best defense in the Phil Parker era. Those are all facts. Some coaches, Jared, with this same defense, some head coaches, I could see this being a 3-9 year. Don, is that fair? Some coaches with this offense could have easily struggled to keep the locker room together, and this thing could have derailed. If it wasn't for Kirk Ferentz's leadership and his ability to coach guys and keep them together, he kept this thing on the tracks and kind of, just like last year, squeezed every drop out of that ketchup bottle and got everything out of them that he could until today.
Our problem is not with the leadership of the guy in charge. That's not our problem.
I agree.
Our problems are relating more to specific positions, I think. And it's just unfortunate that we dug ourselves a hole today that we simply couldn't get out of. Yeah. It's unfortunate, but, I talked about not giving Nebraska any encouragement, and we gave them a lot of encouragement with how we played.
Yeah.
And over time, of course, that emboldens the other team, and all of a sudden they realize, oh, my God, we can actually win this. And at that point, if you haven't already seen a fanatical effort out of the opponent, at that point you will. And I think we saw a really good effort by Nebraska because we gave them way too much encouragement.
And I just want to reiterate that I've been hard on the coaching staff today and on Brian, but Kirk Ferentz's leadership is unmatched, and that's why he is a great one. Don, I'm not going to put him ahead of Hayden. I think you've got Iowa's had 2 tremendous leaders of men over the last 40-some years. We've been blessed with that. So you can acknowledge that while also acknowledging that nepotism is not okay and the problems need to be addressed at the source. Not by firing Barnett and demoting Brian. That's not how this works. The priority is not to keep Brian on staff because Brian's got a lawsuit that makes him unhireable somewhere else. That's his problem. That's my thoughts on it, Jared. But Kirk Ferentz deserves to be credited for the leadership that he possesses, and that's been demonstrated by them winning 4 of the last 5.
Absolutely. I agree. And I've devoted enough time for my call here. But one final question for you guys, and I'll let you get to it. But what do you guys perceive as the future of the offensive coordinator position? Do you think Brian's going to continue on? And secondly, do you think they're going to replace Petrus next year?
I think Petrus is leaving. However, that's not a guarantee, Jared. And Don, maybe you want to provide your insight on that if you have any. But I wouldn't be surprised if this happens, Jared, even though going to the portal is not a thing that Kirk Ferentz likes to do. I've heard from multiple people that Iowa is very much interested in going to the portal at quarterback this year. It's something that Iowa should have done last year. Okay. A lot of our viewers on here are new to this show, Don, because I know this channel, and I'm thankful for it. Our platform has grown exponentially since the last time we had postgame coverage. But if anybody listened to me and Mark Rogers, and Don, I think you even acknowledged the need at quarterback last off season, I've been touting Iowa to go to the portal at quarterback for better part of a year now. And so when I see questions like this question in the chat, let me find it here. Let's see here. Maybe I cannot find it. Let's see. Well, Spencer's comment, need to completely change the offense. There needs to be an actual QB battle. We said the same thing last year. We said the same exact thing last year, Don. This is Groundhog Day. We said, well, this better be a real battle. This better be a real battle.
Yeah, and you heard me talk about equal reps versus equal competition. That needs to happen throughout the spring, and then, of course, in fall camp. And then you have a good idea of who's better than who. But it all has to be, those decisions, those ultimate decisions have to be made in scrimmage situations, live reps. There's not any way of protecting the quarterback. There's some risk involved with that, but you got to find out who the best players are. When, as Coach Wright used to say, when the bullets are flying, in the games themselves.
Yeah, and just remember, as bad as Nebraska is, what's the best part of that team? The best part of the offense, the best part of that team is probably Casey Thompson. Well, Trey Palmer, but that connection between Palmer and
those two.
Thompson. And guess
both
what?
of which are transfers, right?
Amen. And we've talked about I've had, I love it when people say, well, Corey, doesn't that mess up chemistry? I had somebody the other day, and I appreciate the perspective. I respect people's perspectives on these things, Don. But the people that say, well, what does that tell future recruits? We can't start bringing in quarterbacks or it's going to affect future recruiting. Well, guess what? The fruits of your quarterback recruiting are what we've seen these last 3 years. That's what we're getting in quarterback recruiting, Don. So
right.
we're afraid of driving. Now, I will say this. I like the guys they've gotten. I mean, I'm high on Marco Lainez in 23. But I don't think anybody in their right mind believes that Marco is going to start as a true freshman. I'll be very surprised. If he's ready to go and Kirk is willing to do that, I'm all for it. Let's ride. But I don't believe that will happen. And so what are the options here? Do we really believe that this coaching staff has faith in Alex Padilla? And is Alex Padilla interested in coming back? Are they really going to double down with Spencer Petras for another year? What about Joey Labus? I saw somebody in the chat say, well, why not Joey Labus? Let's get him. Let's just start him in the bowl game and hand the reins over for him. I see this comment from Mike. He says Joey Labus will be the starter next season. Based on what? I mean, we haven't seen the kid. We haven't seen the kid at all. I mean, Don, when I saw him at Kids Day, he looked like the third best quarterback behind Spencer Petras and Alex Padilla. And I'm not saying he doesn't have good upside. I would never ask what's the upside, right? I know somebody that might, but I won't do that. But my point is, man alive, and I had somebody say the same thing earlier in the week. Well, Padilla's not the answer. We got to roll with Labus. He's the guy of the future. Based on what? And again, the coaching staff has not proven to have any faith in Joey Labus. So,
well, to get an idea of how it might work out for you, a prime example we saw today, Nebraska's quarterback, a transfer had everything to do with them winning that game today.
But see the apologists, Don, for not doing these things would say, well, look, they're 4-8, or Charlie Jones made the wrong decision because he lost to Iowa. See, perspective is important, right? And context is important. And the fact of the matter is, Charlie Jones made the right move by leaving. For his personal career, he made the right move. And they got a shot to win the West tomorrow, by the way, Don. But Casey Thompson also made the right move, as did Quinn Ewers, as did Michael Penix, as did Bo Nix, who's completely tearing it up at Oregon this year. I mean, I can go down the list. There have been success stories across the country. And for those that say, Don, for those that say the offense is too hard, you can't bring a quarterback in. The offense is too hard to learn. Come on, Don, please.
Again, you put the onus on the teacher. Your job is to be sure they're educated enough to run the offense. And if you have to spend extra time with them to get that done, that's what you have to do. We're just glorified teachers. So if it's not getting taught, then you got to blame the teacher.
So for the record, Jared, I know, you've been drowned out here because I've been ranting for the last couple minutes, but I'll say the same thing I said a year ago, regardless of what happens with Brian. You know how I feel on that subject. And I was not calling for that last season. I wanted to give Kirk, I wanted to give Brian an opportunity to bring in a quarterback from the portal, to hire a QB's coach who actually understood the quarterback position. And instead of doing that, Jared, they said, we're not going to go to the portal at quarterback. Instead, we're going to double down on Spencer Petras. We're not going to, at least not appearing to the public, they did not give equal snaps against equal competition. At least they didn't do it in the open spring practice that we observed, right? And we're going to promote Brian as QB's coach. When they had an opportunity to hire, we know of at least one guy. I know of at least one guy that I would definitely consider to be a QB's guru, who has produced multiple 3-star or less quarterbacks and turned them into NFL quarterbacks. One guy who reached out to Iowa about being the QB's coach, and he was told, no, Brian's going to be doing that. So that was what I said last year. So I'm past that point, Jared. The bottom line is, regardless of what happens with Brian, a portal quarterback needs to be a priority. And there will be options out there, but Iowa's actually got to be willing to go out there and grab one.
Yeah, for me, I'm completely confused. It's like a chicken or the egg thing. And I'm flummoxed because perhaps Spencer could have been a great quarterback, but is the coaching so bad that he ended up being very beyond less than mediocre? I can't figure out what the issue is.
Oh, I think you just said the issue, Jared. I mean, it's and I think acknowledging, that's one thing that we're talking about Nebraska. Scott Frost never did. He never knew how to take accountability. And Kirk does a good job of doing that. But at some point, taking accountability involves action, does it not, Don? You can say whatever you want to say, but if your actions don't show that you're holding yourself or your coaches accountable, then are you really, truly holding yourself accountable, Don? I'm not talking about Kirk specifically, anybody.
If what you're doing is not accomplishing the desired result, then you need to change what you're doing. You need to do something different.
Exactly. Anything else, Jared?
Not at all. I just wanted to lastly say that you and Don, I appreciate you guys. You're a dream team of Iowa sycophants, and we love you. And keep this going every year, because I know on behalf of the Iowa fan base, we appreciate it.
Thank you, Jared. Appreciate you being
here.
Thank you, Jared. All right. We've got Tony. We've got Cole. We've got a caller who's been waiting patiently on hold, and people trying to get through to our call line. Don, are we still good? You still?
Sure.
You got your coffee here. Somebody wanted to know about my coffee, and this is a scent coffee because somebody asked. That ain't Diet Coke. Okay.
I'm hoping for some free Cokes after showing that, but probably not.
Yeah, I don't believe Coca-Cola is sponsoring the show. Don, I may have to turn your video off. Justin wants to know about the Sea Lion Caves. Yes, this is a Sea Lion Caves mug, Don. Have you ever been out to the Sea Lion's Cave out in Florence, Oregon?
No, I haven't. I've never been anywhere too close to it. We did play a game out there against the University of Oregon.
Well, you should have taken the trek west and gone to the coast and then driven up to Florence. Well, actually, Florence is basically straight west of Eugene. Man, beautiful. And you'll be able to go to the Sea Lion Caves. It's a beautiful place. So hopefully, I'm guessing they're not able to, but the Iowa women are out in Portland right now, but they'll probably not make it far enough south. Anyways, I digress. Let's get to our caller who's on hold. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with Coach Patterson, who's on the line.
Hey, Corey. It's Ryan from McGregor. How are you guys tonight?
Doing all right, Ryan. How are you?
It was a nice reference to Coos Bays and the Oregon Coast Highway. That's a beautiful drive. Yes, indeed.
Yes, it is.
Well, I was listening to the beginning of the show, and Don was about to get into describing the analytics of what we failed to do, and my phone died. So I am not at home. I am at my mother-in-law's house, and my mother-in-law and my wife are sitting here listening intently and putting up with me for being on hold what seemed like forever, and I barely have any phone power left, so forgive me.
Well,
I can about imagine what the callers are saying. It doesn't take a whole lot of imagination to figure that out, even though I haven't seen any of the program or heard anything at all what's going on. But I think, it is what it is, and you got to give the team, the players credit, for putting in a heck of an effort. There's no doubt about that. And when you see the players, you realize they work so hard, and it's difficult to play in pain. And if you played football, you understand that. And it's hard to go through a whole season without injuries and things and stuff. So the team made a tremendous effort, and kudos to them for doing so. I wanted to call in just to thank you, Corey, for such an excellent show. Really, it's my final chance to probably do so. And Don, you too, I really have appreciated your commentary. I've learned an awful lot from you listening to you. And
Thank you.
Best when you're out at West Point. I was thinking about you, being out there for the Army-Navy game. And so when you get out there, you can do me a favor and try to explain to me why the Army is called the Black Knights. Because when I was out there at the visitor center, they could not answer that question. So I've always wondered, and I do not know the answer to that. So if you do, you can share it with us. And if not, you can find out when you're out there. Maybe somebody can explain that one to you. But anyway, I've really appreciated the most entertaining thing about Iowa football this season has been listening to you guys. And I haven't missed the show. I haven't watched them all in real time. But I really appreciate your commentary, and I thank you for taking my call. And I'll hang up and watch it tomorrow on my computer and say, go Hawks, regardless of where they go, and just say, we still don't know, Corey, who's fighting for that big hunk of cheese in the sewer. So guess we'll find out tomorrow, huh? Big Ten West is what it is. So that was a great analogy, by the way.
And Ryan, I'll be back on with hopefully with Coach Close. I know he's traveling tomorrow, but we'll be back for post game after basketball tomorrow.
Well, pathetically, I know absolutely nothing about basketball, and I really don't know as much about football maybe as I thought I did, especially after listening to Don. But I won't be able to catch all your basketball games, but I do enjoy them. And I will watch Fran and that, but I really have no comment with any intelligence to share with any of the, visitors to the program and all that. And I get what you're doing, but you're doing such an outstanding job, Corey, that, just please keep it up. And thank you for all you guys have done. Really,
we appreciate you, Ryan. Thank you for calling in, sir.
You have a great night, and I hope you don't pull an all-nighter, Don. Okay?
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
All right. Let's get to Tony. Tony the Tiger. How you doing, sir?
Good. I did actually change shirts. I got my ANF shirt. I had my earlier shirt for the the basketball shirt.
You got some serious memorabilia. He was showing off like a 50-year-old shirt to Coach Close earlier, Don.
1993, Corey. That's
Okay.
not that old.
30 years. 30-year-old shirt.
I don't know much of the history of the show, but I kind of wanted to lighten the mood. Would this be the type of cowboy hat we could get Don to wear? Would that work? Or
I don't think that would qualify.
that wouldn't qualify? Okay.
No, I was thinking more of a Stetson, I guess. I
Okay.
think.
Okay. It just show off your Hawkeye pride. I was trying to see if I could get that going.
Yeah.
I did have Corey left us, but I did have the question I had was for you. What happens now with coaching? I mean, more than likely, we think we're not going to play in the Big Ten title game unless something happens. How do you go about practices knowing you're preparing for bowl prep, and how does that, how do you prepare for that not knowing an opponent? And do you still get, like, when do they start because isn't there like a certain limitation of practices that you get being a bowl team? Like, will Iowa still be allowed if they do not play in Indy? Will they still be allowed to practice all of next week? Or would that count against their?
No, my guess is they're not going to practice this next week. They'll still lift weights, of course, in condition in anticipation of the bowl game. But my guess is until we know who the bowl opponent is, we're not likely to. We might spend a couple of practices. I don't even know how many you're allowed anymore. The rules might have changed. But you've heard Kirk say before that one of the values of a bowl, of course, is additional practice for the younger players. Well, that could just involve fundamental football, of course. It wouldn't have to be specific to an upcoming opponent. And obviously, before very long at all, we will know who that bowl opponent is. My guess is we might know within a matter of a few days. At the very least, it'll be a week away. Let's face it, the only games of any significance that remain to be played are those championship games that are played next weekend and Army-Navy. Army-Navy is not going to be any factor in terms of bowl games because I believe both of them may end up with a losing season. At best, they're a lower-level bowl team. I would think we would be favored over either one of those two in terms of bowl eligibility. I'm not sure that either one's eligible. I'm not sure what the record is right now. They're around 500. So my guess is we'll have a few days for the guys just to recover. They're beaten up in so many cases. They need some recovery time. So you just see them conditioning and lifting and, catching up on academics. Because let's face it, final exams are just around the corner, I'm sure. And there's a lot of preparation that needs to go into that too. So my guess is that's what's going to happen over the next week.
And what does typical bowl prep look like? How is 100% of the practices devoted to the opponent, or is there a certain percentage looking towards the future and the next year and stuff like that?
My guess is the first practices will be dedicated more to the younger players. Maybe it'll be the case simply because we don't know our bowl opponent yet. It's entirely possible that we won't know until next weekend. I don't know when the bowl invites will come out. There may be a restriction as to how early you can even offer a team a bowl opportunity. But obviously some of the lower bowls, maybe they're not in position to take the winner or the loser from the championship games. They're being played next weekend. So you think about it, there's only 5 Power 5 conferences. Well, obviously, the 5 winners are going to go on to bigger and better bowls. And then the 5 losers are also going to, in some cases, get really good bowl assignments too. Is there any doubt in anyone's mind that the loser of Michigan, Ohio State is very likely, almost certain, to end up in the Rose Bowl? And I say that assuming, I don't know, maybe the Rose Bowl is one of the Final 4 sites. There'll be a couple of semifinal games, of course, and those get moved around. And maybe one of the semifinal games this year is in the Rose Bowl. I don't know. Does anyone know, Corey? I'm not sure.
It's not one of the playoff games, at least to what
Okay.
what
So I think it's very likely that the loser tomorrow of Michigan Ohio State is going to go to Pasadena. What a great consolation prize that is. But they certainly deserve it because they're going to be going to Pasadena with one loss. So there'll be a very quality opponent for the Pac-12 representative. And of course, the winner, without a doubt, is going to be in the Final Four. So at least we're going to get one in. I think let me throw this out. What about a 1-point win for one of those two teams? And to really make it interesting, what if the losing team had a missed field goal at the end of the game? Well, clearly, it is possible that both of them are going to get in the Final Four. That's a lot to ask, of course. But I do think that maybe, I don't know who fell out today. I did notice that Tulane knocked off Cincinnati. Now, Cincinnati is not an unbeaten, are they? Maybe they've lost a couple of games, I guess.
No.
But it was a good win for Tulane, obviously. And
I think the loser of the Ohio State-Michigan game, I think, has a really good chance to still get in. Well, we'll see. We'll, of course, see what happens with Notre Dame USC. That's a big one tomorrow.
You're right. SC still has a chance. And, of course, TCU has to dodge a bullet against Iowa State tomorrow to be one of those teams. Obviously, I don't think TCU has any chance to be one of the Final Four unless they end up 13-0. So they have to beat Iowa State, and then a week later they have to beat I don't even know who it's going to be. Who's it going to be? It might be – who might it be from the Pac-12, from the Big 12?
Kansas State.
Kansas State, yeah. But they would have to, Kansas State, obviously, they would have to win out. They'd have to be 13-0, I'm sure. 12-1 is not going to get it done with a loss to Kansas State. That's even assuming they beat Iowa State tomorrow.
Yeah, or even if they lose to Iowa State,
Yeah.
that could open the door if there's like a 38-35 Michigan-Ohio State score, like you said, one on the last second field.
It's entirely possible they'd both get in. It would depend, of course. SC needs to lose another game. Some of those teams that are right now listed 5, 6, and 7, I believe SC is a 6. Who's the 5 right now? I don't know who the 5 is.
I'd have to look.
I'm not sure.
Anything else, Tony?
LSU's the 5.
LSU's the 5. Okay.
Yeah, and SC's the 6, and Bama's the 7.
Is LSU going to be playing in the SEC championship game? Are they in already?
They actually play Texas A&M tomorrow, but I don't know if they are in. I don't know the East and West breakdown.
Should win that game easily.
And I don't know the East-West breakdown.
LSU's only chance, of course, is to win tomorrow and turn around and win the championship game. I would think that's their only chance to get in. But it depends, obviously. Just for the sake of argument, if Michigan Ohio State is a 2-touchdown differential, then obviously the loser's out, and that would make maybe an opportunity for LSU or somebody that's even below LSU. The championship games could change a lot next weekend with how it all plays out.
I just appreciate you guys' time. Everyone like and subscribe, and I do already have an order placed for the merch store, so let everyone know, go visit that merch store, and I'm looking forward to getting that in the mail, hopefully sometime.
Real quick, Tony. So Gary says, enjoying the Hawkeye of the Storm swag, but where are the Coach Patterson T-shirts? I just want to say, this is the cowboy hat. Right? Here we go, Don.
My wife mentioned, Corey, she said, Ixnay on the cowboy hat. That was her comment. So if I have to beg off, maybe just be because I need to be sure my marriage is as strong as ever. So I'm not sure. I don't want to lose my wife over a cowboy hat.
We appreciate the super chat here from Erica as well. But Tony, thank you for calling in, sir.
Thanks. I'll see you tomorrow night, Corey.
Sounds good, sir. All right, David. Is David here? We got David and Cole here waiting. If you're here,
all right,
now.
David.
I see you.
David and Cole here. I am David. You're here.
Can you turn your TV down, David?
All right, David.
Okay, I can't. David, you got to tune your TV down, bud, because I'm hearing it's way big echo. Let's get back to David here in a second, but David, you got to turn your TV down and have your phone on. Cole, Nebraska fan Cole.
What's going on?
What's up, buddy boy?
Hey, I'm
Cole,
taking
Cole. You came on here just to be cheesing, didn't you? You want to rub it in?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I was. That game was nothing that I expected to happen. What I think the one thing that surprised me the most was why Iowa quit giving Caleb Johnson the ball in the fourth quarter. I was like, because he was carving us up pretty good, but yeah, I don't know how that happened. What did you guys think was the most surprising?
Well, I was surprised that we didn't try to play keep away, keep the ball away from you guys, stay on the field with our running game. I was surprised we started the game by throwing the ball so much, and that would have been fine, except we were throwing it ineffectively.
What about you, Corey? You're not gonna get away with that.
Just for the record, Corey, the cowboy hat's not working.
My biggest, make sure the cowboy hat's. So my biggest surprise, I'd say what Don said earlier, just the fact that you kind of come out throwing the football. I just don't understand that, and let's not forget the fact that Spencer was awful before he was knocked out of the game. I mean, he was, I think, 1 of 6 or 0 for 6 or something like that. So he was awful, and he also fumbled the ball again. He needs to understand how to protect the football when he gets sacked. How many times has he dropped the football on a sack, Don? You got to protect the football better. Alex Padilla's got to protect the football better. So I don't know that I'm surprised by anything, Cole. As it relates to Nebraska, I'll go back to the illustration I used earlier. No offense to Nebraska, but a blind squirrel sometimes finds a nut. It's a 4-8 football team. It's funny that people who are in
that's completely true.
I mean, Cole,
this game,
Nebraska's 4-8.
Yeah,
I mean, Nebraska's 4-8. No, Iowa's offense is terrible. We get that, but they're 4-8. That's not a good football team. So it's just fun. It's just, I think it's sad. I think it's sad the fans that you're not one of them, Cole, but all these Nebraska fans that show up in the chat and just trying to troll Hawkeye fans.
No,
I mean,
no Nebraska fan expected us to score 24 points on Iowa's defense. I know I was expecting maybe 10 points. That was max.
Sure, but I'm just saying, like, my point is the way Iowa, how much Iowa has dominated this series.
Yeah.
And, congratulations to Mickey Joseph. I'm happy for him because.
Yeah, how about that? Our Mike Riley and Scott Frost each played Kirk Ferentz, 7 times, and Mickey's played Kirk 1 time and won.
Yeah, I'm happy for Mickey Joseph. I don't know Mickey Joseph. I don't know much about him, but I'm happy for him. And I think the fact that they were able to win this trophy maybe is a launching pad for his career somewhere else if he moves on. That will be I'm happy for him. But as it relates to Michigan, to Nebraska fans, whatever. People don't really get like that kind of thing doesn't matter to me.
I saw Iowa fans saying it's hard to beat the same team 8 times in a row, and that's definitely true. I mean, Nebraska's never beaten a Big Ten team 8 times in a row. So, about Mickey Joseph, he was at LSU for the past 4 years. He was on their national championship team. He developed Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, and of course Trey Palmer now. I think he has 7 receivers starting in the NFL right now. He's an excellent recruiter and receivers coach. The last show that you guys did, you guys were asked, well, why did Mickey take over and not Mark Whipple? And the answer to that is, well, Mark Whipple's been battling some health issues. Him and his wife he missed a couple of days of practice this week. In the Wisconsin or the Michigan game, he usually calls plays on the sideline. That's just what he does. And he got his legs taken out and bodied, and he sprained his MCL or something like that and got carted off the field. And then we had to play our 3rd string quarterback in that game. So yeah, it just all went to hell. But yeah. And of course, Eric Trenander got fired the next week. But yeah, that's why Mickey took over.
Well, congratulations, Cole. I deal with a lot of annoying Nebraska fans, but I'm happy for you. You seem like a class act, and I know you you're an avid follower of this show, so I appreciate your support and enjoy the win. Hopefully it's a launching pad. It sounds like Matt Rule's the next head coach. I know Don thinks very highly of Matt Rule, and that
there's a lot of not happy people about it. I can tell you that. But
you know what? Who cares? There's a lot of happy people when Frost got hired. So I don't think the fans know what's best for the program. We'll see if Rule works out, but I'd like to think Rule's a safer hire than some of the other directions that they could have gone with, like Urban Meyer or even Deion Sanders. This is a safer hire. And by the way, nobody should ever listen to Zach Smith on anything ever again. Okay. To put out there that Deion Sanders rumor, what a ridiculous comment to make. Yeah. It's assuming Rule takes the job, and that was just what a ridiculous seeking of attention there by Zach Smith. But anyways, congratulations to you and the Nebraska fan base for the most part. And
there's one play, like the first touchdown pass to Trey Palmer. Jack Campbell had a dead eye. He could have just smeared Casey, but he just stopped and just stood there and watched him throw it. I was like, Jack Campbell doesn't do that. That was, I don't know if you guys saw that or caught onto it, but rewatch that first touchdown pass. Campbell could have flew in and just destroyed him, but he just stopped right in his tracks and just watched him throw it, which I thought was weird. But yeah, Nebraska was, both their starting linebackers were out. We were down a lot of people, but I know so was Iowa. So I can't say much because you guys got another game to play. We don't. So good luck to you guys in that game. And
yeah, I mean, what will you say? What will you say, Cole, if Purdue and Illinois lose tomorrow and Iowa's the West representative?
Have fun.
Wouldn't that just be? Listen, I'm an Iowa fan, but wouldn't that just be ridiculous, Don? I'm sorry. Come on, 7-5.
At that point, we could probably forfeit the opportunity and insist on Penn State playing.
Oh,
assuming Penn State wins tomorrow.
Yeah,
or maybe a rematch between Michigan and Ohio State.
So that's how Iowa gets
the whole transitive property thing, Don. But you realize that Minnesota completely got killed by Penn State earlier this year, and I don't know what I'd have to go back to the other West opponents. Who else did Penn State play in the West this year, Don? Do you know?
Maybe Wisconsin.
They might have played Wisconsin.
I believe they played Wisconsin.
All right, I'm going to look this up. The reason I bring that up is because they are the ones. You notice nobody has talked about Penn State all year, and there's not a team in the conference in this conference that will benefit more from conference realignment and division realignment. They are the team that gets forgotten every year, especially this year because you lose both of these games, and they've struggled against Ohio State, and you lose to Michigan, and you're just done from the perspective of fans. Because you're in the East, they would clearly be the best team in the West.
The one thing I'm sure of is that Penn State went 3-0 versus the West.
Yeah,
they only have 2 losses, right?
Won by double digits to Northwestern. They beat Minnesota by 28. And as we know, that first game of the season, the narrow victory over Purdue, the Charlie Jones game, that was week 0. But they won that one as well on the road.
They were lucky to beat Purdue, as I recall. That's a game that could have easily gone Purdue's way.
There's a big gap from Michigan and Ohio State to Penn State, though. Michigan had 420 yards rushing against Penn State, I think. Yeah,
a lot of yardage. Yeah.
But again, I mean, compare now. You can't do that transitive property thing because Illinois, was the one team that was really able to challenge Michigan, and each week is different. But I'm just thinking that. I mean, Don, wouldn't you probably assume that Penn State's representing the West if they were in this division? Isn't that feasible to assume?
It would not be hard to imagine that Penn State would win the West based on
100%.
Based on the games we've seen this fall.
100% Penn State wins the West probably the last couple of years too. But
well, Cole.
Yeah, good luck in the bowl game. I'll be watching for sure. And I swear if you guys make it in the conference championship somehow, I'll be watching that too, just for the entertainment.
I kind of want them to at this point. I kind of want Penn State. I mean, I kind of want Purdue and Illinois to lose because just out of sheer morbid curiosity, Don, what that Big Ten championship game would be like.
So does that mean we would go to the game as would our record in conference be 5-4? Is that right? Do we have 4 losses in
yes,
conference play?
5-4.
That'd be the only time a 5-4 team would ever make it to Indy. Would be this year.
That's like the Seahawks. It was the Seahawks or Rams when the NFC West was so terrible, and they'd get into the playoffs at like 7-9. Remember when that would happen? That wasn't that long ago that happened.
That's when you've expanded your playoff system too much.
But really, it's not even a matter of getting into the playoffs. That would be like, given the fact that the Big Ten championship game is supposed to be the 2 best teams in the conference, that'd be like a 7-9 Rams team making it to the Super Bowl, or at least the conference championship. So, anyways, Cole, appreciate the time as always, sir, and hopefully we catch you on the next stream.
Peace out.
Congratulations, Cole, on your win today.
Thanks. Oh, and shout out to that Iowa fan that wouldn't give the trophy to our player. That was funny.
I enjoyed watching that as well. Thank you, Cole. All right, let's try David back again. David, well, let's give David a second. Turn down your TV, David, if you can. David, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good.
What's up? What you got a question for Don, David?
So my phone technically is echoing. The TV's completely turned down.
Okay.
Sure, Don.
Yes, David, you're on the air.
Yeah. Okay. So, sorry, I'm hearing myself through my phone for some reason. I'm not sure why this app's doing this like this. Either way, love you, Corey. I want to say, even while I hear it over and on, love you, Corey, because I think that you say a lot of things that are hard to say, and a lot of people, you just don't care. You give your honest opinion. I appreciate that 100%. I also believe that in the state of Iowa, as it pertains to Iowa football, there are so many fans who the word fanatic is what fan is derived of, right? I don't know if I'm a fanatic. I can be subjective to what I see. So maybe I'm not a fan in this truest term. I know for a fact that our offense has been terrible. I know kind of Semitic reasons. Well, I'm not saying that right. But anyways, there's reasons in our program why the problem is what it is. Line player became a QB coach would be one. You said it. And there are so many friends I'm friends with, deny the obvious. I have a brother-in-law. He's like, our problem is the defense. They play so bad against Minnesota.
David, what can I don't mean to rush you, but what's going on here? You have a question or?
The question I have.
Yes.
It's more of a statement.
Okay.
It's actually more of a statement. If we can't see the problem right in front of ourselves, if we can't accept that we have a problem in offense because of the obviousness in front of our noses, then we'll have the same problem as Florida State. If you want to say, oh, you get rid of the great coaches that's got us here, we're going to have those same problems. Penn State had problems where you denied all the issues that were Semitic in the program. You ignored all the issues with coaches that should not have been there. If you do that, you're going to create a bigger problem than what's worth. It is a real problem.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with you, David, and appreciate your take on the show, sir.
I hear that. I guess the one question I have with Don is, Don, do you think we can beat a team if the other team scores over 24 points?
Probably not. It depends, of course, on what kind of defense they have, but historically it's been difficult for us to come up with 24 points on offense.
Appreciate you, David. Thank you for calling in.
Shout out to Pedro Petras. He had a 110 QBR rating going into the fourth quarter. Well, Padilla did.
All right, sir. Appreciate you, sir. Have a great night, David. All right. Appreciate David calling in, as always, supporting the show. And, Don, am I missing? Let's see. Am I missing anything on this? We're about wrapped up with this thing. If anybody has any final questions, you're welcome to throw that out there. But I do want to real quickly give a shout out to Brad Van Meter and his team down in Des Moines. Call 515-256-6480. 515-256-6480 for a quote. The largest auto insurance company in the U.S. And Brad's small, but very interested team. They're interested in how they can save their customers money while also getting them great customer service, an agent who will be on your side during the event of an accident. Call Brad and his team. And certainly as you explore options with Brad Van Meter and State Farm, you're supporting from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Don, am I missing anything as it relates to notes? I don't have anybody on hold right now. I know we've been going over 2 hours, and I appreciate you being here as always. Am I missing anything that you want to bring out?
I was just looking over the, incidentally, the prediction model that I have in place. And of course, I won't divulge what those 4 parameters are, but just so you know, they won 3 out of 4. So the prediction model held up for our game too. And I think I mentioned, Corey, about average starting field position, how critical that was over the past 4 weeks. And they won that by the same margin we won it last week. 8 yards better than our average start position. And people might think, well, that's not such a big deal, 8 yards. Yes, it is, because if you take that same drive, whatever that drive distance might be, obviously if you start 8 yards closer to the goal line, now you're in field goal range versus not quite being in field goal range, or now you're prepared to go for it on 4th down because you're barely in field goal range versus having to punt if you started 8 yards further back. So even an 8-yard differential does matter. Sadly, we lost on field position, and over the past 4 weeks, if you lost on field position, the odds were 96% that you were going to lose the game. So no surprise that percentage held up for our game. It'll probably hold up again tomorrow too. I would invite the listeners to just, as they watch the games tomorrow, if you have an idea that somebody clearly won on field position, they probably clearly won the game as well.
All right, Don, we're going to go rapid fire. So,
that's my middle name, Corey. Rapid fire.
Rapid fire. Lemansky, first of all, Corey Dadgummit, you have merch. That's the upside. Yes, merch is available. Thank you, Lemansky. From the Hawkeye of the Storm, merchandise is here, and there are some really cool ideas that are coming, Don. So if people haven't checked out the merch line, we've got some from the Hawkeye of the Storm branded merch available right now. Find a link to that in the description of this video. Thank you to the Johnny O Show. You can check out his stuff on YouTube. Check out his stuff because he's been a big part of our show and helping launch the merch line and behind-the-scenes activity. So thank you to John at the Johnny O Show. Jack wants to know, what are the most pressing positions Iowa needs to recruit on offense, Don?
That's easy. Wide receiver, quarterback.
So not offensive line as it relates to recruiting.
Well, I mean, you could upgrade at all positions for that matter. I have to believe, I guess I don't know who else is in the mix, who else is coming. Obviously, if our high school guy that we're all talking about, if he stays with his Iowa commitment, he should be able to occupy one of those 5 starting spots even in game 1, because he's a modern day version of Tristan Wirfs. If Tristan can do it, it sounds like this other guy can do it too. Caden Proctor. I apologize, I couldn't think of his name for a minute. So, yeah, I mean, we can upgrade in the O-line, obviously, but the unusual thing about offensive line play, typically guys that are struggling, they struggle as second or third year players, and the extra year of maturity does matter. So if you're putting more 4th and 5th year guys out there, generally that works for you, because there's a lot to be said for just gaining experience with how to play. Should we have more quality starters in our offensive line? The answer is yeah. In most years that Iowa football has had in Kirk's 20-something years, we've had a better starting 5 than we have this year. That's true.
Okay. Let's get to our caller who just called in. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson. Who's on the line?
Don, Corey, how y'all doing? This is Charles from Des Moines.
Hey, Charles. We're doing good.
So, quick question. Obviously, with the loss today, could change up some stuff. Where do you guys think that Iowa will be playing in their bowl game coming up?
I have such a bad feel for, I see this question in the chat. I have such a bad feel for the bowl pecking order. I don't know if it's the pinstripe. I don't know if it's Detroit. I don't know if it's Nashville. Don, do you have any feel on this? I get the Google search would probably be better than me.
I don't. The only thing I think that I could say with any kind of degree of certainty is our fan following will give us an advantage over some other teams that have very similar resumes to ours. I think that'll help us.
Yeah, definitely thinking. I was probably thinking that we'd be in the ReliQuest. I know I saw something last week that they might be playing South Carolina, but I'm thinking more Duke's Mayo or Pinstripe now. Just, obviously depends on what Purdue and Illinois do come tomorrow, but we will see.
Charles, Ari Gold in the chat says, how about the American Standard Toilet Bowl?
Now, that game would make me hella horny. I hope Spencer Petras will be back for that.
I appreciate the phone call, sir. All right, let's go on to McKinley. McKinley, are you with us? McKinley
might have dozed off, I think.
McKinley, if you can hear us, we can't hear you. All right, McKinley, we'll bring you back. Try to fix your issue, whatever that is. James wants to know, my question for Coach, do you see Iowa using the portal?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Thank you for the super chat, James. And further question here. It's tough for Iowa regarding recruiting. Just thoughts on recruiting to Iowa. Don, I know you don't really buy into that theory because I think, if I recall, and I don't want to speak for you, but you preach to recruits that, look, especially Texas recruits, this is the Dallas Cowboys of Iowa. There's no pro sports team here. You've got an avid fan base. You've got great facilities. It's not this desert wasteland that some people across the country want to paint it as. And that's why I believe, as great as Coach Ferentz has been in his 23 years, I think there are other coaches that could win here. I just don't want us to have this defeatist attitude that once Coach Ferentz moves on, you're going to turn into the next Nebraska. I guess that could happen. But you could also hire a coach that gets the job done and successfully recruits at an even higher level than Kirk, because Kirk's done okay on the recruiting trail, Don. He's done better with development. But I think that Iowa's a recruitable place. Just your thoughts on that.
We have an advantage over a lot of other schools. Other schools are sometimes in competition with NFL teams. And the fact that we don't have an NFL team in Iowa is an advantage for us. Nebraska has that same advantage in the state of Nebraska. But let's face it, that's part of Minnesota's problems is they have the Vikings to compete against. So, there's no guarantee that Minnesota will sell out any game, much less sell out the season as we do. So that's an advantage for us. To play for Iowa is a special feeling because you feel as if you're in a very special place, and the fan base gives you that feeling every Saturday that we have a home game. They show up en masse, and we have one of the best home field environments in all of college football. Not to mention one of the best traditions, of course, with the wave.
Common Sense wants to know about hiring a new OC. Well, you got to – technically that position isn't open yet, but if it were to open up, then there's a discussion that we could certainly have. Let's try McKinley again. McKinley, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you sound like you're in a well, but we can hear you, though. You're audible.
Well, good. Well, hey, I want to say, and I'm sure it's probably been said before, but the nepotism is awful. I mean, Brian Ferentz, all these years, the offense just gets worse and worse. And maybe you could say, oh, well, we're in a rebuilding year, the offensive line, whatever. But we've had Spencer Petras and Alex Padilla for 4 or 5 years now. They don't get any better. They seem to have plateaued years ago. And it's just hard to say, oh, well, this is a rebuilding year. This is an offense that's broken because the offensive coordinator is the son of the head coach, and we can't replace him or change it. And it's really frustrating. I don't know how the hire happened before. And it's sort of like the other thing is Brian Ferentz, if he hadn't got drug into this through all this nepotism, he could be a great offensive line coach, tight end coach. He could be in the NFL making $300,000-$400,000 a year. It's not like he's entirely useless or a moron or anything, but he's obviously in over his head. And I don't understand, you're watching this at the beginning of the season and everybody is like, oh, well, this is clearly obvious. And we almost accidentally get into the big, winning the Big Ten West, going to the Big Ten Championship where we were going to get embarrassed, obviously, because we couldn't beat Nebraska today. And when is enough enough? I mean, Coach, you've been involved in these kind of situations. I mean, at what point in time do donors say, no, this has to end? At what point in time does Kirk say, okay, there's too much heat here, I have to do what's right for the fans, do what's right for the players, and move on? Like, when is enough enough? I guess that's my question.
Well, the fact that we have one more game to play, I think it's logical in my mind. Those people that are in position to make decisions, they would say they have to simply gather all the facts, and that would mean we won't have a final opinion until after the bowl game. Obviously, we got one more chance to excel, and the negative side of that would be we have one more chance to fail. So I think it depends on what happens in Game 13. Let's face it, 7-6 doesn't sound nearly as good as 8-5. And in that regard, the bowl game will matter a lot, whoever it is.
It's like the statistics are all bad, whether we back in and win this bowl game against whoever. The offense is not getting better year after year after year after time. I'm frustrated, and I know a lot of people are too.
Let me make one comment talking about recruiting. Let's just talk about wide receivers. One of the things that bugs me a little bit, I think too much value is placed on height in receivers and not enough priority on speed and quickness. Let me give you a couple of examples to back it up. Easy names to remember: Tim Dwight, Damon Gibson, to name two. They were both undersized, but they were both incredibly quick and had speed and had good hands. And they were a little bit like number 3 from Nebraska. He's not the biggest guy in the world either, but he can flat play. So, and my point too of bringing up Tim and Damon. And here's another example: Robert Smith. Robert Smith was a high school running back. Tim Dwight was a high school running back. David Gibson carried the ball a lot as a running back too. Those guys were all exceptional. So I would simply suggest don't just arbitrarily go after nothing but guys that are playing wide receiver. Let's face it, the typical team in high school, their best athlete is the running back. So you better consider him. Maybe he's not big enough to project as a running back, but he's certainly big enough. And let's think about some of the guys in the pros. What's the guy that played for the Chiefs last year that got traded? That guy was electric. He's not very big either. Whatever his name is, I can't remember. Corey, do you recall?
Tyreek Hill.
Tyreek Hill. I know he has some character issues maybe, but there's no doubt he's one of the most explosive players in the NFL. And there are other examples in the league that you're familiar with. It's not always based on height, weight. I think a bigger component oftentimes is speed. I had a guy that was such a wonderful guy to watch play in FCS football. His name was James Norris. He was 5'4", but he could play. Matter of fact, he ran a kickoff back against Nebraska that year, even though he was an FCS player. He was a warrior. He made a lot of plays for us. And I'm not suggesting Iowa should recruit a guy that's 5'4". They shouldn't. But frankly, in terms of ability with the ball under his arm, he was absolutely as good as any FBS player you could find. He simply fell to FCS football because of his height, because he was considered to be too short to play. Well, he made a lot of plays, I know that. And as Coach Fry used to say, you never weigh or measure a man when he crosses the goal line. I've never forgotten that, and it's true. So I just hope we don't just fall in love with a receiver just because he's tall. Because if he can't move his feet, he's not going to be worth much to you.
Well, good point. Hey, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, guys.
Thank you, sir.
You bet.
Just so everybody's aware, Keegan Johnson did play today. You know, I had reported yesterday that a source had reached out to me and let me know that he was going to play, and he indeed played. No targets, though.
That's a mystery to me. First off, it's a mystery. We're down 24-0. Wouldn't you say if Keegan Johnson's one of our better explosive athletes on offense, wouldn't you make a real effort to get him the ball? It's just odd that he never got targeted.
Why is he even out there? What do we even do? What's the point? What's the point, Don?
You mean to put him out there and not throwing the ball?
Correct.
What's the point? I agree.
I mean, it just, makes about as much sense as running Petrus in empty. Makes about as much sense as Iowa coming out today throwing the ball. And makes about as much sense as Iowa not going for 2 when you're down 24-0.
I do recall for sure, Corey. I don't know how many snaps Keegan had, but I do remember in the second half when we're down 24-0 or 24-7, whatever the case might be. I do recall Keegan being in the game, Keegan being lined up against press coverage, man free tight. All he had to do was get on top of that corner and it'd be a big play.
I saw that as well.
I don't remember where the ball went, but it never went his way.
I just have and I don't know. This is nothing concrete that I've been told by anybody reliable, but I think Keegan's gone. I'll be very surprised to see him play here, and that's just me speculating, Don. I'm not, again, I want to, and thank you, Erica, for the super chat. Frosty is OC. What's the upside? Is there one? Appreciate that, Erica. But T-Leeb says, does Keegan get a medical red shirt? Well, I don't know about he's going to get a red shirt, right? So he could play in the bowl game and he'd still get a red shirt, but that doesn't necessarily mean he'll use that here.
I don't know. I don't know how many games he's been in.
He's only been in 2, Don. He's been in 2.
2 games. The other one was maybe Nevada.
Yep.
Yeah.
So no, he's going to be able to redshirt this year. I don't think it's a coincidence that he played. I mean, I'm not saying there's some conspiracy, but I don't believe there's a coincidence that I don't believe it's a coincidence that he played in this game, where if Iowa had won, they would have had another game he could have played in the Big Ten championship game, and then one final game in the bowl game. That's 4. So he would have maintained his red shirt. So he could have played in every game from here on out. I don't believe it's a coincidence that they waited to use him this week. I know he practiced a lot last week. I understand he's been dealing with a hamstring, but that whole situation is just odd. And I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Keegan Johnson. Again, we get back to our rapid fire questions because we're running this way overtime, Don. Jack wants to know, how do you fix Iowa's offensive line in the offseason? It's a loaded question, Don, but can you answer it in a
Well, first off, it has to all start in the weight room. Guys have to get bigger. They have to get stronger. They don't have to necessarily get faster, but as you get bigger and stronger, of course, you become a more explosive player. You're better prepared to drive somebody else off the ball, to be able to sustain your block a little bit longer, to put that defender a little more on his heels. Let's face it, when you're talking about O-line versus D-line, the guy that's playing on his toes is the guy that typically wins. The guy that has better drive coming out of his snap, coming out of his stance, I should say. The guy that's able to continually drive his feet and keep his feet under him and get some movement on that other player. That's the kind of offensive lineman you want to create a seam in the defense. And so that those guys in general, as you know, are younger players, Plum being the exception. The other four guys, I think, Corey, and true, they all have at least 2 years to play. I think that's right.
I believe Nick DeYoung, I believe this is his 4th year in the program, I believe.
Okay. You're right. DeYoung, I hadn't thought about DeYoung because, of course, Stevens was injured last week. Is that right? And Stevens didn't play at all today, I guess.
Yeah, and they ran some six offensive linemen out there. 6 offensive linemen set. I don't know, what do you call that? Heavy set? I mean,
yeah.
They did that a little bit today with DeYoung.
Okay.
DeYoung and Ellsbury.
Gotcha. What was that? That was like third and 1 or something?
I think they did it a little bit more than that. They were doing that. They were doing some heavy stuff in the first quarter. Am I wrong on that? I mean, you have to watch back on tape.
I'm not sure. That's the kind of thing that's hard to learn from the stadium seats.
Yeah. Eric wants to know, how bad is DeJean hurt? Someone said it was a concussion. I have not heard Kirk after the game.
That's what I said at the time. It must have been a concussion because it looked like there was nothing from an injury standpoint to his torso, to his legs or ankles or any hips, anything like that. It looked like it was all above the shoulders. So I think it was a concussion. It looked like he might have been knocked out for a period of time. I was hopeful he might make it back, but the concussion protocol, of course, you got to jump over some hurdles to be able to play again on that same day if you're knocked out. Maybe it's almost a foregone conclusion that you're done for the day. I don't know how his played out, but he certainly didn't get back on the field, did he? That was it.
Yeah, and I don't know about Spencer Petras, his status moving forward. I mean, he's going to have plenty of time to heal unless somehow Purdue and Illinois lose tomorrow, and that was a question in here as well. What's the status of the West? Justin wants to know who controls the West. I don't even know. Is it?
Well, Purdue does. If
Okay.
Purdue wins, they're in. And the only chance that Illinois has is if Purdue loses.
All right. Soldier of the USA says Brian handed over QB job over North Dakota State coach. Yes, he was. Rough Rider, has Laporta already played his final game for Iowa?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Why do you say that, Don?
Because I talked to the head coach
Okay.
a couple of days ago, and I simply asked. I knew at the moment I didn't even know that Laporta was out, and then I realized that they had already announced that Laporta was not going to play today. But I just asked Kirk simply. I said, "How serious is it? Is there a chance we're going to get him back?" And he said, "Yes." So I don't know if he meant back for the championship game or back for the bowl game. I think certainly back for the bowl game. The only question in my mind was if he was going to be back for the Indianapolis game, and that's a moot point. So I don't think there's any doubt. I think Sam Laporta will play in the bowl game. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, that's what my question is. I'm not, players do opt out nowadays, Don.
You're right. But knowing Sam as I do, I'd be surprised if that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, but I also don't hold anything against Tyler Goodson. I know you didn't like when he did the same thing, but players do that nowadays, and it is what it is.
If Sam elects to do that, especially realizing it's not a Power 5 bowl or whatever you call it. What do they call that upper echelon bowl?
Yeah,
top 6 bowls or whatever.
It used to be called BCS Bowl, but
BCS bowl. We're not in one of those, so if he bows out, I certainly won't hold that against him, because if he does, he'll have good reason to have done it.
Clayton wants to know, was watching Vines on our last possession, didn't see him get a step of separation in the last 3 plays. Did a wide receiver other than Nico have a catch? I've got the stats in front of me right here. As far as final numbers for receiving, Reganey had 12 targets, Don. 12. Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible. That's the difference with having a different quarterback in there. I hate to say that, but that's one thing that Alex did that was positive, is he did try to spread the ball around better than Spencer Petras ever does. And maybe that's also a result of Sam Laporta being out. But 10 targets for Lachey, 7 catches, 89 yards. Nico Reganey, 7 catches on 12 targets for 60 yards. Arlen Bruce had 5 targets, just 1 catch. Gavin Williams, 3 targets, 1 catch. Deontay Vines, no catches on 4 targets. Breck had 1 target, no catches. LaShawn Williams, 3 targets, no catches. And again, no targets for Keegan Johnson.
So among all those other wide receivers, we had 1 catch. Arlen Bruce.
Yes, besides Reganey.
Besides Reganey, 1 catch.
Right. Common Sense wants to know, does Sam Laporta have a COVID year? Let's see. Does he actually, technically?
Probably does, I guess, but I'd be surprised if he want to take it.
He does have a COVID year. He does have a COVID year, but I'd be very, very surprised. Remember, we were wondering if he was going to be back last year, Don. So he does have a COVID year, but I'm with you. I don't expect him to take that COVID year. Jack wants to know what parameters should Iowa focus on to have a top 60 offense next season, and can it be done, Don?
Top 60, sure, it can be done. I think so. First off, we need to get a great quarterback. Think of it this way: Coach Fry used to have this expression. Now, this is back in the days of old-fashioned automobiles, but Coach Fry always used to say, the quarterback is the carburetor to your car. If you have a carburetor that's out of sync, then the car's not going to run very well. So that's a pretty good analogy, because if you got the right kind of guy taking snaps, he can certainly elevate the play of everyone else, because he's the guy that distributes the ball. And in that regard, he can get it to the right guy most of the time. The great ones get it to the right guy almost all the time. And so we need to upgrade it at quarterback. You heard me say earlier, we lost today is Nebraska had better quarterback play than we did. And I'm not picking on our guys. It's just that their guy was exceptional. He played an outstanding game, and he had to do with them winning the game.
Absolutely. Jesse wants to know, if all QBs are healthy, which plays in the bowl game? Spencer Petras will play if he's healthy, Don. I'd have a hard time seeing them do anything else.
I agree. And I doubt that his shoulder injury is serious enough to keep him out. I would expect that he'll be healthy to play.
Kurt says, I need a call screener. And he repeats it twice. Kurt, if you want to pay for a call screener, if you'd like to pay the salary for a call screener, I'd be happy to hire one. I've said that before on the show. So if anybody wants to pony up the dough for that, they're welcome to do that. But show doesn't make enough money to do that, Kurt. Troy says, did Iowa address the QB need with any new recruits this year? Are they going to try the transfer portal or just ride it out with what they've got? Again, I like Marco Lainez. They got James Resar in 24, who's at the game today. Don't know as much about him. Like Marco a lot, but he's a true freshman. I think they'll go to the portal. We've kind of talked about that. Common Sense wants to know, what is the status of the Brian Ferentz lawsuit? It's still open. That makes it hard to hire at the NFL level, Don, or really anywhere. But that's not Iowa's problem. Don, I'm not saying I'm not asking you to endorse Brian being fired or not. But if any coach, including Brian, is deserving of losing his job based on performance, should his hireability somewhere else affect whether we relieve him of his duties or not?
No. The priority for the program has to take precedence over just what might be in the best interest of a particular person. So if it's justified that you're being replaced, then so be it. This is not, as Coach Fry used to say sometimes, we're not running the Salvation Army here. No offense, but we're not handing out free meals to people, even if they are hungry. You guys got to earn your keep, and if you guys aren't producing, that's on you.
I see a couple people saying I need a chat moderator. Erica, whoever, reach out to me. My email from the eye of the storm at outlook.com. I don't want to make someone a chat moderator without kind of vetting them first, because too many cooks in the kitchen can be a bad thing, Don. So, but anyways, reach out to me if you're interested in helping out in some form. Joey, appreciate the compliment. He says, Don and Corey, awesome show, outstanding and fun. Thank you, Joey. Appreciate you being here. Steve says, Kirk Ferentz said he thought the O-line played well today. You don't need film to see how poorly they played. Why would he say that, Coach?
I guess it's all relative. I think Kirk is simply stating that based on his expectations, they maybe played as well as or better than he thought they might. It's always relative. So he's a better judge, of course, of what they're capable of doing. And that's the only way I can explain his comments, is that's how he felt compared to what their potential to play was.
Ari Gold, how many times do we see a lineman for Iowa blocking nobody and a defensive player going untouched to Padilla? So unreal. CJ.
Yeah, you heard me talk, Corey, about secondary stunts. That's got to be corrected. That was a problem today. We had a defensive back in our backfield that was untouched. And you have to have ways of accounting for secondary stunts. And so you've either got to have a player such as a tight end to pick it up when he sees it, or obviously a back has to pick it up. But the bottom line is that you got to account for the guys, and you get in trouble when you have a nub formation. If your widest player in the formation is a tight end that's right next to a tackle, that's not very far at all from the quarterback. So if they're going to fire that corner, you better have a way of accounting for him, because otherwise he's going to be around your quarterback's neck in no time at all.
Uncle Rico says that Arlen Bruce's foot was not out of bounds. It was the defenders. I'll look back at that again. I could have been wrong when watching that. So I'll watch it back again. But the officials, of course, saw enough evidence to overturn that call. Kyle says, Corey and Don, do you think that Kirk Ferentz will make his next hire stipulating that it's still his offense? I'm assuming someone as long tenured as him wouldn't hand off the offense totally regardless of the hire. Well, at this point in his career, Don, this is my opinion. I have respect for Kirk Ferentz. What would generate even more respect from me is if I saw Kirk Ferentz say, you know what? I've given a lot to this program, but Iowa's given a lot to me. I'm going to hire the best offensive mind. And regardless of philosophy, we want to be not just average. We want to be good on offense. And if that requires a change in philosophy, that's okay. I'm not one of those people that thinks that Kirk micromanages everything on offense, but Brian is running his offense, right? I mean, this is the type of offense Kirk has ran regardless of coordinator. There's a reason why he's hired, well, one of them is his son, one of them is his buddy, but even Greg Davis fit the mold of the pro style offense. And there's nothing wrong with a pro style offense, right? Teams, there are teams out there that win with a pro style offense, but can you sympathize with me as a fan when I say it'd be nice to see Kirk willing to take a shot on a different type of offense at this stage in his career, since he's been here 23 years? There's not much else. What else can he do other than get an elite offense, or at least a good offense that brings Big Ten championships? Because you're not going to win Big Ten championships, Don, with this offense. So
right.
Why not take a shot on maybe a philosophy or a coach that doesn't exactly fit the Kirk Ferentz motto, if you will?
I do think in general, a lot of fans assign Kirk too much credit for controlling the offensive game plan. I really believe that. You got to realize, and I've been a head coach. Head coach has so much to do. He has to rely on his offensive and defensive staffs to do yeoman's work in terms of formulating a game plan. And I'm sorry, I don't think that's the problem. I don't think Kirk is restrictive much at all, and as far as putting the game plan together. And in that regard, he's no different than Hayden. You know, Coach Fry used to say, do you need my help? And if I didn't need his help, I would tell him, no, Coach, we're in good shape. Now, I might have some unsolicited help from him anyway, of course. That's okay, he's the head coach. But I'm not buying this that Brian would be, not even pick on Brian, just that our offense would be better if Kirk would simply take his hands off the offense. Kirk is not the problem. The problem is more with, what's happening between the players and coaches on offense. I don't think Kirk is being that restrictive with the plays that are put on the field. I think the offensive staff has that responsibility, and fundamentally, I think Kirk lets them do their job. That might surprise people, but that's how I feel. That's what I suspect is true.
Cowboy hats off here, Don, for the final 5 minutes of the show. Phil Parker's Pa wants to know, what plays would you call on first and second down late in the game like today that would keep the crowd up and screaming? Both drives at the end by third down, the fans were crickets. I don't know that you're concerned.
Late in the game, he says. Well, first off, you got to go 2 minutes. You got to get as many snaps in. I know one complaint I heard from a former player who knows a lot about football. In his mind, we really lost the game in the third quarter because we didn't have a real sense of urgency about trying to get as much as we could out of that last 20 minutes of the game, 20, 25 minutes of the game. You're down, let's face it, 24-0 theoretically is a 3-score game, but the reality, what are the odds you're going to be able to convert 3 different times after a touchdown? So in reality, we were down probably 4 scores. And just to back that up, after that first touchdown, we didn't go for 2. We simply kicked the ball. So right then, we're saying it's a 4-score game, not a 3-score game. And in that regard, we should have had a huge sense of urgency. And I like to use the example. It's a similar example. We were over, and you remember the game, Corey, or maybe you don't, but you've heard about it. We were playing Indiana. We got off to a horrible start. One of the worst turnovers of all. We fumbled a kickoff. They recovered on the 20-yard line. They had a running back that was all Big Ten, Anthony Thompson. Remember him? You might not remember him, Corey, but he ran for a ton of yards. He was a big-time back. And here we are at Indiana, and we're down. It was at least 17-0. I can't remember the score at the time, but we were middle of the second quarter. And this may be hard for people to believe, but it's true. The rest of the game, we were 2-minute offense. And as Dick Vermeil told Gary Bender, they were doing the game. Gary Bender made a comment to him. He said, we got a dog on our hands today, meaning a bad game. Dick Vermeil's response, he said, you wait. I was going to make this game last forever. He was exaggerating, of course, but not by a lot, because I think we threw 64 passes that day. We still lost the game, but we did give ourselves a chance to win. And you might remember the story because the coach, and I can't even think of his name right now. Help me out, Corey. Because he was one of their best. He's got sons that are coaching football now. I'll think of it here in a minute. Anyway, outstanding coach. The best Indiana teams ever were his teams. And he ran a fake punt on the first play of the fourth quarter. He ran a fake punt from the minus 25-yard line or whatnot. It was good for about 50 yards. And I told him, I said, Coach, that was a great call. How many people ran a fake punt when they're ahead by 10 points? And he said, hey, we had to do something because you guys were going to reel us in. You were going to beat us. That's why we ran the fake punt. Bill, help me out. Gosh, that's horrible. Senior moment. Bill Mallory, thank you.
Steve Cashman, thank you, Steve.
Yeah, Steve, I owe you. Bill Mallory, great call. You can go look it up. It's all true. But anyway, in the second quarter, we decided we have to make this game last a long time. How do you do that? 2-minute offense, the rest of the game. We ended up with 64 pass attempts. We put up 500 yards of offense or more. I can't remember. We still lost the game, but we gave ourselves a chance to get back in the game. And this old player's comment was, we simply didn't have enough of a sense of urgency because we need to make the game. If there's only 20 minutes left on the clock, you need to find a way to stretch out that 20 minutes to make it count for as much as you can. Instead of having 4 opportunities with the ball, you need to find a way to have 5 or 6 because you're not going to win the game otherwise. And that would be an argument for going 2 minutes earlier than we did today.
Engineering for me, did Keegan play today? Yes, he did. He did play, no targets. Brandon says, will a QB come seeing the offensive line? They can get a portal quarterback that's above the level of, that has proven himself above what any quarterback at Iowa has proven. There's going to be enough out there, Don, and enough, again, mention the success stories this year. And look, I couldn't disagree more with this comment from JD. And JD, I appreciate your comment, but he says, be careful what you wish for. Casey Thompson, a transfer, basically said he didn't care about this rivalry and didn't know there was a trophy on the line. Those guys are who you'll get off the portal. They won the game, JD. Who cares if Casey Thompson cares about the rivalry? They came in here and won. I mean, who cares? Who cares if there's a guy connected? A lot of these guys that Iowa have playing for him don't care about the rivalry. You think Keegan Johnson really cares about? Well, he cares about this rivalry because he's in Nebraska. His dad played for Nebraska. But do you think, you think Amir Smith-Marset really cared about the Iowa rivalry when he got here? I mean,
I would say this: if Casey Thompson doesn't know about the rivalry, I wouldn't say shame on Casey Thompson. I would simply say shame on their coaches for not being sure that he did understand the rivalry. But you could argue, Corey, that it doesn't have to affect his play. He might play a great game not even knowing about it. He did that today, I guess.
Yeah, and I just don't. Again, desperate times come for desperate. This isn't even a desperate measure. There are teams that have upgraded their quarterback position via the transfer portal. Oregon being one. There are other. I mean, LSU. They're on the verge of the college football playoff. Don. Texas.
I was going to say, Corey, let's not forget what would be attractive to a potential recruit at quarterback. He would like to know that a lot of other pieces are in place. Well, it's safe to say that next year the defense is going to be good again. The kicking game is going to be good again. And so my point is, maybe he can be, to one degree or another, the missing link. Maybe he can be the guy that makes all the difference. Yeah. Because obviously that's the area where we have the greatest opportunity for improvement.
And Jesse wants the Gabbert kid. That's Brett Gabbert, Blaine Gabbert's brother. And Jesse also, different Jesse, says, would he be an upgrade? I believe he would be. Hard. It's apples to oranges, right? We're talking about Mac versus Big Ten, but he was really good when he was healthy there. It's funny, again, Don. Somebody earlier this week, all I did was tweet out, hey, this kid's in the portal. Potentially an option. I think he is a potential option for the record, Don. But somebody made a comment, nah, this kid ain't it. Just play Labus. Again, what has Joey Labus done or proven?
We know that Gabbert actually been effective in games, right?
Yeah, he came in here in 2019 and was effective against Iowa. Tackle says, or Takal says, Coach, which do you think is more important to get from the transfer portal? Better O-line players or better QB? I believe our offensive woes start with the O-line.
Well, if I just had a chance to recruit one great player, I would rather it be a great quarterback than a great offensive lineman. You've heard me talk about linemen before. A great offensive lineman can consistently block one guy, right? That's what we had a year ago with our center. He got his block just about every time. So he wasn't the problem. The problem lied more with the other 4 O-line positions. So the beauty of getting a great quarterback is he can make everybody look better. The same can be said for a great running back. Yes, protection, but let's face it, if he doesn't have great protection, if he just has good mobility, if he can extend plays, he can still give us a chance to overcome our inadequacies in the offensive line. Don't get me wrong. We need great players in the O-line too. But I would still, if I had to pick one, I'd favor a great quarterback over a great offensive lineman.
Common Sense wants to know, isn't it possible that Kirk is looking for a landing spot for Brian somewhere so he can resign? Well, that's possible. Again, but if this weren't Kirk's son, that wouldn't be Kirk's problem. And Brian is an adult, for the record. He's made millions of dollars here, so. But I understand it's a situation. T-Leaves, Don, you're in Barta's job. What do you say to Kirk?
That's a hard one. I guess you would say I'm in a really awkward position here because I'm supervising your son, and obviously our problems are more on offense than defense. So help me out. Help me out here, Kirk. I'd prefer not to ask your son to go somewhere else. So is there some way you can help me to solve the problem that we have?
And you're just theoretically, if Gary's wanting this change to take place, that's how you would approach it. This is what you're saying.
Well, I have a great appreciation for the work that Brian's done for us, and if I were the AD, I would certainly. I think if you possibly can, you give a guy a chance to solve your problem before you solve it yourself. Rather than require someone to leave, you provide them with the opportunity maybe to go somewhere else and present the impression at least that it was my decision to leave, not someone else's.
For the record, I don't think this is a fair question, Ryan. So this is why I haven't put the question up. So if you can ask a million times in the chat. I don't think it's a fair question because the OC job is not open. You're asking Don if he would take the OC job. You're asking him if he was a young incomer, would he take the OC job? Well, he's not. Right, Don? Are you considering yourself an up-and-comer?
No, I'm an old and downer, I think, instead of an up-and-comer.
But I appreciate the question, Ryan, and I get what you're getting at. I just don't think it's a fair question for Don. So that's, Don, you can answer it if you want, but
I'd rather not.
I don't think it's a fair question.
I'd rather not.
Hey 19 says, any Caden Proctor updates? No, nothing since the last update. Still committed to Iowa, but nothing as far as what his train of thought is right now. And he's a 17-year-old trying to make a decision. Kyle Spence, how much of today was on Kirk Ferentz, considering all three units came out flat? One of the main reasons Jason Garrett was fired from the Cowboys was because of consistently slow starts like what happened today. How much of that is coaching, Don?
Well, you feel as a coach, you feel my job is to have my guys ready to play. And if they're not ready to play, then logically you do take that personally. You're asking yourself, what could I have done differently? What I did didn't work as well as it needs to work. So, what can be my approach going forward? Here's my approach for this game. Of course, this is such an unusual game because it's a short week. And we don't even have the usual preparation that we typically do have. And now the next game, of course, is entirely different because we've got all kinds of time to prepare for it. So it's really a moot point until next fall. But I'm sure that Kirk does feel responsibility for how we play as a team. And of course, he's only one person, but he's in better position to do things and accomplish things than anyone else in the program. And he takes that responsibility very seriously. But Coach Fry used to say, I can't play the game for you. Kirk could say that same thing. Kirk wasn't the one that started slow. It was the players we put on the field that started slow. And in that regard, Kirk's he's going to agonize over what he can do differently, I'm sure, because he's conscientious with how he does his job. But the bottom line, of course, is you can't make them play, and you can't guarantee that they're going to play intelligent football. So you do the best you can to educate them and prepare them. And Kirk's done that. He does that every week of the season. And sometimes it seems to work better than others. Just remind everybody again, a lot of these guys haven't even gotten into their 20s yet. Some of them are still 18 and 19 years old. And the older ones are still early in their 20s. So they're not professional football players. They're students. They have other things to worry about other than Iowa football. Don't get me wrong. They place a huge priority on Iowa football, but they do have other responsibilities that relate to academics. And of course, they have personal lives to deal with, injuries to deal with. It's a complicated process. And I'm not trying to make excuses for anyone, but I'm simply here to state, as conscientiously as you prepare your team, sometimes you have to feel as a head coach that you didn't get it done. And yet, you should take it personally, I guess, but you should recognize you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. You've heard of that expression. It's easy to talk about doing a great job, but it's hard to always accomplish that for the whole world to see.
And again, Don, though, to reiterate, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. That's true. But if you're having consistent issues across multiple players, not just one player not executing, when you have position groups not executing, that falls back on a coach.
Right.
Right? Am I wrong on that?
No, the position coach has a huge responsibility. That's why they're well compensated for their time. It's not an easy job. It's a difficult job. And of course, your fundamental challenge is to outwork the people that you're going up against, to prepare your guys better than they prepare theirs. And if you lose, that would suggest that the preparation needed to be better.
David says, give my email, what's the cost on sponsorship? Again, reach out to me if anybody's interested in sponsoring anything here on the show. From the Eye of the Storm at Outlook.com. From the Eye of the Storm at Outlook.com. And Pugmaster, thank you, Pugmaster. I have to say this show is soothing for the soul after a train wreck day. Thank you, Don and Corey. Appreciate that, Pugmaster. Rough Rider, another fine show. Thanks, Don and Corey. Thank you, Rough Rider. And their final thing of this show, James, you're the final caller. Final word. Welcome back, sir.
But first off, I just wanted to start off and say I appreciate Don coming on the show and talking about it. I really enjoy it.
Appreciate that, James.
Second, I guess I'd kind of wonder, I got a question for Don. It seems like even over the last 2-3 games where we had more success running the ball up the middle and blocking straight up versus doing the zone blocking stuff. Am I the only one that kind of noticed that?
Well, I think a lot of our successful runs today were still zone blocking schemes.
Right. Well, and then the other thing is one question I had is after DeJean went out and we put that freshman in, what changed in the second half to where they weren't tearing us up with that guy covering the wide receiver that he was?
Well, based on what their starting quarterback said, he felt that they simply went conservative and quit throwing the ball. And you heard me make that comment that I thought they did go conservative. He made the comment after the game to the media. He said, I could see us throwing for 400 yards in that game, and I could see why he said that based on the first half. They were doing a good job of hitting passes down the field. He was athletic enough, even though we were trying to get heat on him. And of course, we did bring extra rushers at times, but that's again the value of having an athlete playing quarterback. He's a good athlete. He extended a lot of plays today. He's got hot feet, and he's a good runner when he has to be. Now he didn't run for a lot of yards. That wasn't the point, but he extended a lot of plays. We had a hard time getting to him because he's maneuverable in the pocket. He was able to extend plays and get the ball off, even though we were trying to get a good pass rush going. That's just the value of having an athletic quarterback. And when I say an athlete, I'm not suggesting that a guy like Spencer's not an athlete. He's an athlete too, but he's simply, if you compare his feet to some other guys' feet, the other guys are better. And let's face it, the more escapability you can have at quarterback, the better off you are. The Buccaneers would like Tom Brady a lot better if he was a better runner. All you got to do is think back to, how about this for a guy? I like the Buffalo guy because that guy's not only a thrower, he's a runner.
Yeah, I will definitely agree with you on that. I thought going back to what they were asking about whether or not to recruit a quarterback versus offensive line, I think I agree. I would go after a quarterback, as our history has shown, especially with Kirk being there, that offensive line play is not something that's down for very long.
You're right. We've got a proven track record of developing offensive linemen. We don't have that same proven record of developing quarterbacks. That's another reason to have a priority of recruiting a quarterback that maybe can make a difference.
Although I will say this, Don, my confidence in Iowa's ability to turn this offensive line into a strong unit has wavered a bit, because last year I said, hey, I like the personnel. I have not seen any improvement collectively. Maybe Kirk has, but if comparing last year to this year, it's been pretty much the same for me. I mean, I'm not an O-line coach, but my confidence in their ability to develop across the front there has been a bit shaken.
Right. I understand that. This will certainly go down as a below average offensive line compared to others that we've had in recent years.
Anything else, James?
No, I think that's it. Like I said earlier, though, I wanted to thank both you and Don for doing the show. It's really great to be able to come and talk to you guys and vent a little bit after what was a rough Saturday.
Appreciate that. We've been over here over 3 hours, and the thanks go to Don for hanging out. So,
and then I just wanted to say, good game, Nebraska. You guys played a heck of a game.
Absolutely. Appreciate the call, James.
Yep. Have a good one, guys.
You as well. All right, Don. Again, thank you. It seems like whatever we do, we end up going 3 hours. So, sorry this wasn't under better circumstances, but as you and I both know, Nebraska defeating Iowa 24-17 in Kinnick, basically shutting out Iowa's hopes of the West title. Purdue and Illinois would have to lose, both have to lose tomorrow for Iowa to have any chance. Of course, the storylines in this game, Spencer Petras starts the game 1 of 6 for 9 yards. He gets sacked, fumbles the ball, gets hurt, turns the ball over. Alex Padilla comes in. I thought Padilla played okay, but certainly I don't think he's the long-term answer. 16-33 with 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 141 yards, 2 sacks taken. But again, he has not been put in a position to succeed, in my opinion, whatsoever. Luke Lachey, 7 catches, 89 yards, and a touchdown. Nico Reganey, 7 catches, 60 yards. Arlen Bruce with 1 catch for 3 yards. Gavin Williams, 1 catch for 2 yards. Deontay Vines, Brody Breck, LaShawn Williams, they all got targeted, but no catches. Another strong day for Torrey Taylor, a long of 49, average about 43 yards per punt. Net total of 214. Another solid day for Drew Stevens. He was 1 of 1 on field goals, made a big one from 45 that kept Iowa in the game in that fourth quarter, Don.
Incidentally, that kick would have been good from 55, I'm sure.
Yeah, very good kick. He's been a terrific.
He hammered it.
He's been a terrific positive in a season that's had some downs, Don. There's no question.
Yep.
They've got themselves a good kicker, and they need to get him on scholarship ASAP.
You're right.
I personally feel it's ridiculous that you have one of your most important players not on scholarship. And I understand it's how Iowa does things or how Kirk Ferentz does things, but that's ridiculous.
I'll say this, Corey. I would be absolutely shocked if he didn't go on after this fall semester.
And I wouldn't, Don, if he's not on after this fall semester, I would not blame him one bit.
Are you there?
Options. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you just froze for a second.
If for some reason Iowa didn't put him on scholarship, I wouldn't blame him one bit for exploring options in the portal, frankly, because that would be totally.
If I were him, I wouldn't even explore options. I would simply leave because he's earned his scholarship.
Yeah, I agree. Final stats in this one: Iowa actually outnumbered Nebraska in first downs, 18-17. Net yards rushing 124 for Iowa, 51 for Nebraska. I was right about that. I said Iowa would rush somewhere between 100 to 150 yards. I did not think they'd hit as many big plays as they did. And really the two big ones were the plays to Trey Palmer that really opened things up. And I feel bad for TJ Hall, who's going to be a really good corner, Don. I know you got a lot of faith in him, and I do too. But he's young and he'll learn. And the second one, as you said, may not have been his responsibility. Nebraska did outgain Iowa 329 to 274. A lot of those yards did come late as Iowa was trying to make a comeback. Overall, turnovers kill you, right, Don? I mean, that's kind of the story as well. It's going to be hard to overcome. What are the final turnover numbers, Don?
It was 4-1.
Okay,
they ended up being +3.
Yeah, you just can't that's just almost impossible to overcome.
It is.
We'll move on, folks. And again, thank you to all for being here. If I missed your comment, I'm sorry. I did my best here. And we'll be back. Hopefully, Don, maybe I don't think we're going to be talking about a Big Ten championship game, but regardless of when we're back, we'll be back at some point, hopefully maybe previewing a bowl game, Don. At least can we get you back for that?
Sure.
And I will be back tomorrow, folks. Iowa TCU. Well, I'm assuming it's Let me confirm this real quick. I'm assuming it's TCU in the game against the Hawks tomorrow. They played Cal this evening, who's awful. Let me just confirm that TCU won that game. Let's just hope they did. Yes, TCU wins 59-48 over Cal. So Iowa TCU tomorrow, 6 p.m. Central Time, CBS Sports Network. The Hawks will play for the Emerald Coast Classic Championship. Post-game coverage to follow right here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. If you're interested in sponsoring the show, reach out to me. If you want to be a mod in the chat, you can reach out to me from the eye of the storm at outlook.com. Please hit that like button on your way out. That helps. Please subscribe if you haven't done so. You can donate by Venmo, Cash App, PayPal in the description below. Certainly follow me on Twitter if you're on Twitter, at From the Hawkeye on Twitter. If you're on Facebook, like the Facebook page, please, From the Hawkeye of the Storm on Facebook. You can share the stream, the show out on social media, because if you're enjoying the content, others will as well. As you can see on the bottom ticker, we've got a merch line out now, and it's available through YouTube. So just click the description below this video and the link in this description below this video to get linked to our merch line, which will have more variety in the merch coming here in the hopper very soon. Shop Amazon with us. You can find the link to our Amazon store in the description below as well. Again, the final, Iowa 17, Nebraska 24. The Hawks falling to 7-5 at the conclusion of the regular season, and we'll wait to see what happens with Purdue and Illinois tomorrow, and likely in a potential bowl game thereafter. Don, once again, thank you, sir, for being here, and hopefully we're talking under better circumstances next time.
Glad to help out, Corey.
All right, folks, thank you for being here for the last 3 hours. For Coach Don Patterson, and one more shout out before we leave. I want to forget our guys over at State Farm down in Des Moines, Brad Van Meter and his team graciously sponsoring this show. Please check his stuff, his options, his insurance options, whether you're talking renters, boat insurance, whatever, auto insurance. Give his team a chance to serve you better. 515-256-6480 or bradvanmeter.com. Thank you to Brad and his team down at State Farm in Des Moines. You are supporting this channel from the Hawkeye of the Storm when you pair up and team up with Brad Van Meter and his team. For Coach Don Patterson, I'm Corey Bratta. We will talk to you soon.